Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Tyler, do you want to do the honors and kick us off?
Sure. All right. Well, thanks for being here, everybody. We've got a great lineup of presenters today for you. But welcome to the Tennessee Virtual Drive-In Workshop. Trish and I are excited to be with you and other counselors from all over the state. We've got four great presentations today on great topics that are very relevant to the work that we do about working with first-gen students, Latinx students, collaborating with college admissions officers, and of course, everyone's favorite topic right now, the new FAFSA. Our presenters come from CBOs in the state, a Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation that administers the Hope Scholarship, high schools, and a university.
Awesome. And we are also really excited for the workshop this morning, primarily because it's the first time we've really had the theme. So paneling going off of the annual conference from earlier this last year, we are ultimately building off the theme of It Continues With Us. So we are really excited to align everything with Southern ACAC and the strategic plan and to put this theme in place, embracing everything that we're doing with our students and the work that we do. And we hope that these sessions are going to give you strategies and knowledge that you can go back and work with your students to really help them put them first and to help them throughout their college search process. So just going over the agenda this morning, I'm going to go through some housekeeping notes, but ultimately, once we kick it off into the sessions, we'll do session 1 and session 2. We'll take a small break, and then we'll continue on with session 3 and 4, and then we'll wrap up right before 12:45 this afternoon. Central Standard Time for those in Central Standard Time. And so again, my name is Trisha Culver. I'm one of our regional admission counselors from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I'm regionally based in Nashville. And my co-host this morning is
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Llewellyn. I'm the Assistant Director of College Counseling at the Webb School of Knoxville. I'm entering my second year in the high school world. Previously, I worked at UT with Trish for about 10 years and just loving working on the high school side.
And just jumping into some housekeeping before we get started, we are going to be offering some continuing education credits. So ultimately, with those, you will be emailing Diana, the executive assistant for Southern ACAC. She will ultimately send a follow-up email. We have some work on our end to make sure that you will get those continuing education credits, but we'll make sure to give you the clock hour form and the evaluation form for feedback. And then once we have all those submitted, then we can get those continuing education credits for those. This session is also being recorded. So if you do want to access this anytime moving forward, it'll be available on the Southern ACAC website. And then lastly, throughout all of the sessions, we will be running Q&As at the very end of them. So if there's any questions that you want to ask our panelists, feel free to drop them into the Q&A feature. And Tyler and I will be moderating those throughout the morning. And we can definitely help moderate those questions that you have with our panelists. So just feel free to drop those into the chat or the Q&A feature at any time. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Tasha Burnett for session 1.
Hello, everybody. Again, as she said, I'm Tasha Burnett. I am a counselor here at the Collegiate School of Memphis. I serve as Director of College Guidance here. So I'm so happy that you're here for this session. This is a session that is very close and dear to what I feel like my purpose is about.
Tasha, I just turned it over to you.
Okay.
Are you able to click through now? There we go.
Tasha, you muted yourself somehow.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let me go back because I was clicking and now it's not working, the clicking again to go back to the introduction. Sorry, guys. If you have access, can you just take me back to the introduction and I can start talking?
It says waiting for you, Tasha, to control the screen. So try clicking back.
There we go. I got it, I think.
There you go. Yep.
Okay. How did I go all the way that way? Okay. Is this taking me to the end? I want to go back though. I don't know how to go to how to take it forward. It's going into the next presentation. I'm trying to go. It's only letting me go one way.
I think it lagged.
What do you suggest I do to try to get it back to the beginning?
Hey, Tyler, I think I just gave it back to you. Are you able to go back to it?
Yeah, I canceled it.
Are you able to give me? Because I don't have control, unfortunately.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, sorry, y'all. I promise we practiced this.
While we're working on this, though, let me just give you a bit about me. So I started off, I've been in counseling over 20 years, but I started off in mental health counseling. And in my work with mental health counseling, I had to go into schools and decided that I was really passionate about education and decided to go back to school for my school counseling degree. I got that from Capella University. And since then, I started doing college counseling. Been at the present school that I'm at for 5 years now. And I'm also working on a doctoral program, and my research is on pretty much college resources for students of color. So that's just a little bit about me. Talking about serving first generation students is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm excited about just sharing a little with you today about some of the things that have been proven to be very beneficial for the students that I work with. Trish, you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, Trish, try to share your screen again. I'm so sorry, y'all.
Guys, I apologize. So we can go ahead to the introduction.
Okay, Tasha. So I gave you permission. So just try clicking it one time to get to your first slide. Yep. Okay.
Okay, so by
There
the
you
end of the session, basically, we're going to talk about some of the challenges that African American students face, and that's unique to this population, first gen, and helping them to navigate their college journey. We'll talk about their challenges, talk about the application process and things as resources and steps that you can take to help them through their process, financial aid support briefly, and school resources, and just some key takeaways. So one thing that I think is important for professionals that's helping first generation students to understand is that first gens, that definition can vary by different institutions. Every institution doesn't necessarily classify them the same, but this is a general definition that's overall, like, if most likely this is what they'll see as first gen. It basically just means a student whose biological parents, neither of them have attended college or completed college. Some schools don't even consider them second generation, even if their parents did go to college. If they didn't finish, some schools say they're still first generation students. So it varies. Just when you're working with students, be sure to make sure whatever schools they're targeting, they understand what that school qualifies as first generation. But for today's purpose, I want you to know that I'm working from the definition of where a student's biological parents have not graduated college. They don't have a college degree. Some of the characteristics that I found and this is the source, is the Chronicle of Higher Education, for first generation students, is they are more likely to attend classes part-time or be juggling their classes with a full-time job if they're in college. Some other characteristics for first gen students, college students, is that they're more likely to be well off. Another way to say that, they're more likely to come from lower to middle income families, opposed to white students that's their medium income is like 90,000. The medium income for Black first generation, or they're not even talking about Black students, just first generations in general, is about 41,000. That's what the medium income of the homes are. So there is some issues with economic there. First gen students are also more likely to attend two-year colleges as a starting point for their degree. But as we all know, and we're working with students, sometimes when they start off at two-year college, they have a higher percentage of maybe not completing or moving to four-year college. So that's one of the characteristics that they deal with. And then they also have the disadvantage of not having parents or not having support in the home that can walk them through the process, that's been to college before, that know the college application process, that can provide them support. So they lack the advantage of parents' experience in college. And lastly, first gen students pretty much can be, well, this is a good actually characteristic for them. They basically have the opportunity to transform not only their lives, but their family lives, and build a future and economic wealth. So all of these characteristics, most of them seem like, oh, they're challenges, but really there are some benefits for first generation students too, because they have this great opportunity to provide access for themselves, where they can increase their income and careers and just mobility. Let's talk about some of the challenges that first generation students do face. Some of them is underrepresentation. So especially when we're talking about African Americans, and we can even think about Latino students as well, Hispanic students, that they are underrepresented. They're going into spaces, especially if they decide to go to a PWI, where there are a smaller percentage of the body and they're just not represented. They may not even be represented as far as faculty. I had a student who went to a school and they were Hispanic students, but they went and there were no faculty or no professors of color. So underrepresentation. They could have limited access to resources. And I'm not talking about just resources and money. I'm talking about resources in understanding opportunities, getting information about different scholarships, resources of having people that they know that can connect them with people that can mentor them, or to help them with different opportunities. They just have limited resources. There are some culture and social barriers, especially when we're thinking about college life and some of the things that entail with that. I even think about something as simple as like Greek life. They have sometimes they don't have any framework, or they're kind of culturally, they're out of their element. Financial strain, of course, lack of guidance, just a lack of having someone that can walk them through the process. Imposter syndrome. I think everybody can maybe understand that and been in situations where they felt like they may have felt like they didn't belong or they were imposter. And just also having a support network for them while they're going through college. I wanted to just get a couple statistics to share with you guys. The National Center for Educational Statistics in 2001, they said there was a total of 16.6 million undergraduate college students enrolled, with 51.8% being identified as white, and the students as Black students were 13.9. So this takes us back to that underrepresentation, the underrepresented, I'm sorry. Education Data Initiative, this is from 2023. They basically said Black and African American college graduates owe an average of $25,000 more in student loan debt than white college graduates. 4 years after graduation, Black students owe an average of 188% more than white students borrow. So that just goes to the financial strain. We'll talk about it a little later, but it's really important to understand these different challenges so that you know how you need to support these students and to help them to not make choices like choosing a college where they can't afford it, for example. The first thing I wanted to share with you is just the college application process and how you can help support some of these first-gen students who don't really know about the college process, how their schools and you as professionals, you can support them. Some essential steps. These are steps that I have seen and have been proven in my work to help students be successful with that transition and trying to apply for college. Early exploration is really important for first-gen students to get exposed to college culture, get exposed to college process, different types of colleges. What does it mean? What are the benefits of going to college? How can that improve the trajectory of my life very early? Unfortunately, the reality is a lot of first-gen students sometimes are not in institutions or they don't have access to that kind of information. I myself was a first-generation student. I did not even start hearing about college until I was in high school, and it was through my peers. I went to a private school, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I didn't have access or information. So early exploration is really important with this group. Building a support network. The way that you build a support network for first-gen students is to create opportunities to build relationships with them. And then with you building relationships with them, you can then like connect them to people that you know can support them. All of us in our profession, we know people that are like, there's, someone is can help them with this piece. We just have to be willing to help them to understand that support is important and help them build that network and then help them to extend it. Research financial options. This is probably one of the most important aspects for first-gen students, for them to not only understand the financial burden of college that it can be, but also to research financial aid options. A lot of them don't understand that I can go to school. You'll have a lot that just feel like they can't afford to go. And it's like, no, like there is financial aid. You can get grants from federal government, from your state. You can get, scholarships. Here in Tennessee, it's the Hope Scholarship. So just giving them access to information and showing them, yes, there is a way. You have to put in the work, but there is a way that you can afford and go to college. It's an opportunity that you can take. Have them visiting college campuses so they can get acclimated to college culture, to get them excited, to get them interested, to understand that is a whole, I think a lot of times that when you, especially, I'm not even gonna say just first gen, this is just in general with students, they really don't understand all of the benefits of being in a college community. So just getting them on campuses, visiting, and understanding that they have that option. Another thing in the college application process that has been one thing that I target in my work, I will be honest, I actually take my seniors and I have them like in class, like they see me twice a week in class. So with that time, what I can do is help them to craft their essays. That includes maybe having admission counselors come and tell them what are the kind of things that admission counselors are looking for. That comes from having them to do opportunities like identity wheels, and just having them to figure out how they can communicate who they are and what their value is and what they can bring to that college. That's a real important piece for first gen students. Focusing on academics, help them to understand that if this is a trajectory that you want to go, it's important that you are showing your academic ability, that you're showing up, that you're trying to increase your rigor, that you are pushing yourself academically. The other piece is I guess what I want to stress is with the first gen student, you have to be cognizant, you have to be aware that they will need you to walk them through each step. It's not where you can just expect them to come to you with questions. A lot of times they don't even know the questions to ask you. So you have to be a little more hands-on, and you have to take them through every step and also give them examples, show them, even if it requires sitting with them while they're completing an application, because a lot of times they will have questions, or just have an opportunity for them to ask you questions, even if you're not sitting down with them while they're doing it. They really need support in that process. I've had students that have made mistakes on applications, and it wasn't intentional, it's just that they did not know. The other piece is just helping them learn how to request recommendations, get them, and then utilizing college support services. I'll talk about that a little later, but that's an essential step in helping them to apply for college. I'll have time for you to ask questions at the end if you have questions. Financial aid support. So here, before I just kind of start talking about working with first gen, I would like to tell you that it is important for us, knowing the statistics, knowing that this is a group of students who not only have some challenges, like they're coming from maybe lower to middle income families, not necessarily having the same resources and access, for us not to educate them and encourage them not to make decisions where they're taking out huge amounts of loans and putting that burden on themselves to incur that debt on top of that. So one of the things that's really important for first gen students is to have the conversations with them and their families about financial aid support. Not just with financial aid support, but also I believe it's important to have those conversations about the idea of choosing, and when you're choosing your colleges, how to choose them and how to make qualitative decisions that are not just based on, I just want to go to the school because it's got the best football team and stuff like that. Because a lot of times with first gen, they get so excited about the opportunity of college, and then they just pinpoint colleges that they always see online. They don't consider colleges that may be in closer to them, they want to go away, but just helping them to make qualitative decisions. But with financial aid, first generation college students are more likely to come, we know, from low income families. So here are a couple statistics that I found that will help to just educate or help to motivate how we work with them. This is according to the Institute of College Access. 30% of first generation bachelor degree recipients had difficulty with student loan repayment. That's deferments, forbearance, and delinquencies. 46% of first generation borrowers attended institutions in the bottom quartile of default rates. I think it's important for us to make sure that if they're considering schools that we don't think will best benefit them, to communicate that. The 2001 study by Pew found that first generation college students incur more debt paying for their education. I will tell you by personal experience. Again, I told you I'm a first generation student. I have graduated a long time ago. I don't want to tell you guys because I don't want to tell my age, but it's been decades. And I am still in student loan debt. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping first generation students make better decisions, because no one told me anything. I was just taking out loans. I was doing plus loans, and my parents was doing, I was taking out max, and no one told me to apply for scholarships. No one explained that I would have to have this huge debt. And I want us to be able to help first gen students not to just get to college, but with them finishing, not to have this huge burden after they finish college of all this student loan debt. And then even if they do get a salary that's making a good, decent amount of money, they're trying to deal with that debt, if that makes sense to you guys. Okay. Let's move to school resources. A 2022 report released by educationdata.org shows that first generation students have a 92.2% higher dropout rate than their legacy peers. And those seeking a bachelor's degree had a dropout rate of 23.5% higher than average. So it's very clear that when you're supporting first generation students, it's not just helping them apply for a college, it's not just helping them apply for scholarships. They need ongoing support so that they finish college. And so in this section that I'm gonna go into, this is more for those that are at schools. And if you're looking for ways to better support your students during that process. This is what some schools can do, some resources that educating and connecting those students with campus support. This is an important thing. In my role and at my school, we have an alumni support program where we kind of support our students. We try to do quarterly check-ins with them. We do events. We try to keep the communication open so we can provide them support. One of those things is before they leave high school, we are showing them all the supports for the campuses they're going. Let's identify what supports you have on campus. Do they have a first generation program? Is there somewhere you can join where they provide support to first generation students? I cannot stress how important it is for students to get on campuses and find support on campus. Where is the counseling office? What happens when this happens or that happens? How do you access what is a bursar? How do you access? Who can you go talk to if you're having these issues? Or even financially, go to the financial aid office. We're always advocating and showing them how to utilize those resources, especially on campus. Because although you may have an alumni support program, they really need somebody on campus to support them. Encouraging attendance to bridge programs. That's an important thing for first gen students. They graduate that summer before their goal. It's important to kind of encourage them if they can. A lot of times they can find programs where it's not, hugely expensive. They can find a bridge program to help them transition into that first year of college. That can be very, very helpful for first gen students. And then lastly, as I said, one of the resources I wanted to share with you all is the opportunity to maybe for schools to have alumni support programs. And again, that just looks like you having dedicated staff who checks on their college, their students in college, their alumni that are in college if you're in high school, and just connecting them to resources, making sure that every year they complete the FAFSA. It's just so many things that I can give an examples about. But the high schools or, their support networks can help them in that process. So I encourage trying to, if you don't have something like that, if you're a high school counselor, consider trying to see if that's something that you can, advocate for, or try to see if your school is open to maybe trying to do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be you. So I'm not trying to give you more work, but that's just something that you can consider to do. All right, so key takeaways. Why do I keep doing that? I'm sorry, guys. Let me go back. Sorry, guys. It's going a little slow, but I'm trying to go back. I feel like I talked really fast, but we can have question and answer period. Guys, I'm sorry. This is kind of just moving real slow. I'm hitting back, but it's not moving. So give me a second. Zoom is not my friend today. Okay, key takeaways. First generation students, they are defined differently within educational context. Even different colleges have different definitions. I even saw one where it said they consider first generation students, students who, I forgot what it was, but it was really weird. So just be mindful that some schools do have different definitions of first generation students, but for the bulk of schools, you'll probably find that they define first gen students as students who don't have parents who earned a college degree. Explain that to your students as well. I found that a lot of times students don't even understand. Like I have students like, Ms. Burnett, in my first gen, my brother is in college now. And them not realizing, yeah, you're still first gen. You and your brother, if you graduate, you will be the first generation in your family to graduate, but you're still first gen. They have distinct experience and hurdles that are specific, and they do require that you tailor to those needs. I can't imagine, it looks different. I worked at a school where it was probably no first gen students before. And the work that I did looked totally different. So just understand that you have to approach it differently, understanding those specific hurdles that they have to jump just to get to college, but also to complete it. College application support is a necessity. Like if they don't get support, they could probably apply to college and get in, but most likely not only may the college may not be a fit for them, but they will struggle. They may have make some decisions like I did and go to colleges that they really couldn't afford and taking out all these loans, or even in the process of trying to figure out a major and classes and how to talk to an academic advisor, all those things they need support with. So it is a necessity to provide comprehensive support for first gen students. And if possible, and I know people have, sometimes have caseloads and they can't do it, but if possible, they really do need individualized support. So they need an opportunity, even if you're like going into classes or pushing in, or even if you have a senior seminar, if you're talking whole group with some of your first gen students, you're going to have to individually kind of check in with them and make sure that they understand and they don't have any questions. It's very important. With navigating financial aid, just again, we talked about walking them through that financial aid process, they're in them families, understanding. I mean, things as simple as what is a grant? They don't know that. Like, what is a scholarship? Explaining those terms. What is a COA? What does it mean when they say COA? They don't know what cost of attendance, just walking them through all those steps and making them aware and making sure they know all the options available to them. The other thing is empowering the students. This is one of the best things, is just empowering them with the knowledge, teaching them how to advocate for themselves and navigate those financial challenges with higher education. That's really important. Because I will tell you, a lot of times they feel like that they don't have any options. And so you just have to help them to see you have options. You can go and talk to people. You can kind of figure it out. You can apply for different things. So just navigating that with them. Connecting students with campus resources is, again, very important for helping them to not be in that number of first-gen students that do not graduate. We saw that statistic, and that was pretty high, of the number of first-gen, especially Black students that go to college that doesn't graduate at the same rate as their peers. So we want to make sure that we're helping them to connect with campus resources, connecting them with programs maybe on that campus, being honest with students, guys. I mean, I've had students that consider schools that had no support for first gen. And, I was honest with them. I don't know, you know, if that's really going to be a great fit for you, especially if I know it was a student that needed a lot of support from me, then I know that they're going to continue to need support in college. I want them to be somewhere where they have that support. So connecting them, letting them know about counseling services, letting them know about mentorship opportunities and academic support services on those college campuses are really, really important. Again, building their networks, helping highlight the value of building strong networks, helping them to do that within the college community, showing them how to do it, giving them examples on how that can look. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight again, one of the things that schools can do, particularly I'm talking about schools and agencies that worked with high school students, is to have alumni programs where you provide ongoing support with them, advocating for them and establishing a support base and a place where they can come, and at least you can direct them to where they need to go. That includes you connecting with those professionals on those college campuses so that you can have a relationship with them. So you can even say, hey, there's this student, blah, blah, blah. And then lastly, mentorship opportunities. So that's what I kind of wanted to share with you guys about this process. I'm sorry about the few glitches, but I am really excited to see if anybody has questions.
Any questions for Tasha? Feel free to type them in the Q&A box.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, alumni support is so important. Yes, I can. I will be honest with you, with working with first gen versus non-first gen, I want to say that relationships really matter, but I will say that having first gen students having that person that they have a personal kind of connection with matters. Let me give you an example, because a lot of times they are afraid to communicate, even when they don't understand something that you've tried to show them and walk them through steps. But I will say that with first gen students, I've noticed, I don't want to say this, but I'm gonna say it, they're a little more high maintenance, to be honest. You have to be available for them to really tell you exactly what's going on with them, what they want to do, to even tell you family situations that will be important for you to understand, to help them to make these decisions. So I would say the biggest piece I will tell you between working with first gen and non-first gen is the relationship thing is really important for them to trust you, especially because there's something that they don't have access to their parents to be like, what do you think? Or do you know? Or if they don't have people in their family that can say, I went through this process, I went to college, they're dependent on you and they're not going to really believe you or take your advice or if you don't, they don't have a good relationship with you. So that's number one. The other thing I will say the difference between first gen and non-gen working with them is having to walk them through the steps a little more succinctly. So with students that have parents that's in college, a lot of times they will come to me and their parents, they already did their college list. They've already looked at the college, they already looked at the majors, they've already know if it has what the student wants to do. Like they already kind of have that fixed, so you're just helping them with the process. Well, first gen students is not the case. They don't know what to look for. They don't even sometimes know I should be choosing colleges based on majors or based on the activities I want to do or based off of these different things. So it's just taking it through step by step. I hope that answers your question. I think the next question is, how do you suggest doing work with a large caseload, 260 to 300, and having no opportunity to see students in a class setting? Oh, that's really difficult. I will tell you, it's very difficult. I have worked in the past. In my role now, I can do just college counseling, so it's a little different, but I have worked as a school counselor and had this caseload and had to deal with so many different things. It was literally like really hard to get to those students. What I will say is that if you to please first advocate getting into the class. I know that's hard, and I don't know if administrators be willing, but I have found that I had to, in some places, I had to advocate, look, I need to see these students. And sometimes when you have a large caseload, you're going to have to do big groups because the reality is you're not going to be able to really do individual and be as impactful because you just don't have the time. So I would just advocate building that relationship with your principal. The best thing for me is always to build a relationship with the principal. Well, first, I am giving them data, I'm showing them why something is important. And for the most part, that has been successful for me. So I would just say advocating for seeing them in a class, even if and I'm not saying you'll have the opportunity to do it very often, but at least get in there in August, you need to get in there, some of those times in the year. In October, when it's FAFSA time, you need to get in there. You need to figure out those pivotal times where you're going to need to walk them through. Hope that's helpful. How do you get in front of your seniors twice a week? Trying to develop a new plan. Okay. So let me tell you, at my school is very fortunate where they actually schedule it's a senior seminar class. So they actually schedule it in the rotation of the block schedule. So the way that it's scheduled, I see my seniors twice a week. So, it's like usually Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, it's 2 days a week I usually see them. And I will be honest with you, most of the stuff that's been implemented in the school, they already had that implemented when I got here, but like the alumni program, and we even have a foundations program where we start college access. Honestly, we just started this a couple of years. We're starting it in 6th grade. It's actually connected to gym. So what happens is they have gym a couple of days a week, and then a couple of days a week, they're with a person that's on what we call the foundations team that's just doing sixth grade appropriate things just to get them acclimated to college. And so we do that with each grade going up to high school. The biggest thing that I can say is to advocate. Put in proposals. I know schools have structures, but if you sometimes put in proposal and to help them to see how it can configure in the schedule, sometimes they'll be more willing to allow you to find more time. But it's really about you being able to indicate and you being able to show, if you have to show research that shows that these students need more time with you, it's really about advocating and really pushing for it. And then also with that, you don't have to worry about taking from their core class at time. So just try to figure out a way, if there's a way, even if you can collaborate with, I find that a lot of times teachers like social study teachers are more willing. I'll be honest, even sometimes your English teachers are more open to allowing you to come in, especially during the time of like college essays. It's like if you just attach what you're doing, like where they can attach it to what they doing in their class, because it's like it's just practice. You need to do a college essay. Why not include the English teacher? Like, why not make that a part of the curriculum? So that's the way. The next question. I'm reading the questions because I don't know if everybody can see them. Over the past few years, I've had students interested in accepted in HBCUs, but the financial aid packages, can I tell you, I haven't even read this whole question, but I already got emotions reading. Financial aid packages have not been nearly as strong as our local PWIs. How do you navigate those conversations with students? I'm gonna tell you, I'm honest. I am completely honest. Because I was in a place where nobody explained to me anything. I ended up going to a PWI that was really expensive. Like, I didn't even know to consider other options. I'm really honest with them. And I explained to them, hey, look, even when they tell me schools that they're looking at initially, I explained to them, look, this school historically does not give very good financial aid packages. I'll even give them examples of students who decided to go anyway and ended up having to come back home. I'm in Memphis, so a lot of them end up having to come back home. Some get the opportunity to transfer to University of Memphis, but some don't. Some, they can't afford it. They come home, get a job, and they don't finish college. So I'm very honest with them and say, look, I know you want to go to this HBCU, but at the end of the day, if you cannot afford it, you will be okay going to a PWI that's more affordable, because I feel like they can get they're exposed to you just have to be honest with them and help them to make qualitative decisions, because you don't want to send them, and have them go to a school where I had somebody who had $35,000 a year of unmet need. That's not a good choice. They're not going to always listen to you, but I just think it's important for you to communicate that. This is where relationships are important. Most students that I have those conversations with, is usually they don't get offended because they know Ms. Burnett care about them. So that's where the relationships come into place, where you can be honest with them. But I'll be honest with you, you have some families that's just a part. They're like, we don't care. We're just going to take out parent loan. We're going to do whatever because we want them to go to this school. And in those cases, it's just like you gave them the information and but I advocate for them going to any school that's the best fit for them. And even with a PWI, it's not just about financial. If it's a PWI that don't have any resources, that don't seem like they can support those students of color, like, you have to be just really honest with them. I hope that answers your question. I've also done things like this. I've been very transparent. So like my current seniors this year, like I showed them my student loan balance and that jarred them. They were like, Miss Burnett, and I was like, I know, I'm just trying to help you not to make the same mistake. My favorite systems, it's really weird. I think I'm a little different than most people, I really love Naviance, but I've heard people complain about Naviance and they like score more, but I love Naviance. And the reason why I love Naviance is because I love their reporting system. It's just easier for me to keep a hold of who's applying where, what needs to be done, who's requested transcripts, everything that, and this is a thing that may help you guys. I don't know if everybody do this. I don't release any transcripts unless they put the request in Naviance. I'm not doing through emails. It has to be in that place. So that helps me to keep account of everything, make sure everybody is on point. Or if I see somebody hasn't, I'm like, what's going on with the school? I love Naviance. I also love, as when I'm talking to students and I'm telling them to go research colleges, go see what colleges you want to put on your list. My favorite site for them to do that is Big Future. I think they do the best job of helping students. I know platforms like Score and Naviance have where they can do college searches, but I have found that Big Future, for me, that's what I have found that's been most helpful and easier for students to just do college search and figure out stuff. Teaching them to apply for scholarships beginning as early as 9th grade. Once they learn that process, they can continue to find funding for HBCUs. Oh, absolutely. One thing that I did not state, I'm so glad you just stated that, that's great, is that with first gen students, it's not going to, you will help them more if you just don't tell them here are scholarship sites. It's important for you to be able to tell them about scholarships. So for instance, I have a few students that are dead set on HBCUs. So what I have been doing is anytime I see any scholarships that I know that they qualify for, and it's particularly for HBCUs, I am sending it to them. And I'm showing them. And like you said, if you know students who are in 9th and 10th grade and they're already communicating that they want to go to HBCUs, or even not just HBCU schools in general, right? You have to go ahead and start having them to start to commit to looking for scholarships. In 11th grade, what we have them do is to research every scholarship and put it in a spreadsheet so that when senior year come, you know, and this is due in January, this is in February, you already have it set. But one of the things that's really important that I have found beneficial is me actually sending them scholarships. And I'll be honest with you, with first gen students here in my school, I don't just send it to them, I send it to them and the parents so that they can have that extra support person that's pushing them. Because I'll be honest with you, they don't always automatically understand the financial piece. They don't. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes you just have to push them to kind of do that. I think I've answered all the questions. There are a lot of scholarship for students in categories, different categories. There's a lot of scholarship opportunities. What I have found, and I'm sure this is the same for all of you guys, is that it's easier for my students to either, they've been most successful in getting those institutional scholarships that they have to apply for, not just the merit scholarships that you get for, you know, applying and getting a certain ACT or GPA, but also those local scholarships. So scholarships that come from agencies or communities here in the city of Memphis where I am. I haven't had huge benefit over the years of seeing many scholarships coming from those big national banks and or like, you know, Ronald Reagan and things like that. Can you tell us about the school you work at? Absolutely. So I work at a independent private school. It's middle high. I work in the high school. Again, it's part of the mission for this school is college success. So that may be why they have been open to setting up this structure where we're providing this intense college support. So what we do is we have a foundations team. The foundations team consists of like 4 people, and what they do is they provide support to students, like I said, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. The courses that they have and the curriculum they have to help them to be prepared for the college journey. It's not like every day. It's a couple days a week. It's usually tied into like their fitness, that kind of the period for that. Like some days they're doing that. However, once they get to 9th grade, they have one semester of what we call foundations, and that's just strictly college and career. And the same with 10th grade and 11th grade, they have one semester where it's just college and career support. And so that's just so that they can each year be building. First, 9th grade, we're not really pushing like look for scholarships and stuff. We're pushing, do good. This is your first year of your high school career. Your grades need to be on point because you want your GPA to start here. That's another thing with first gen student. You have to explain to them why that's important. You have to explain to them why it's important for you to maybe take a dual enrollment. Why is it important for you if you're wanting to go to a school that's a little more selective? You have to increase your rigor. They don't understand those things. So that's what we do. As they get to like 10th and 11th grade, those classes are more like ACT prep, and it's like helping them to start developing their college list and helping them to do like activities that help them to talk about themselves so that when they get to their college essay, that they're having a easier time writing those. Then for senior year, they have 2 days a week, like I said, in senior seminar, and that's all year round. I mean, that's the whole year. It's not just one semester. In addition to that, here at this school, we have an alumni support program. So all those people that I told you were on the foundations team, those 4 people, they also serve as alumni support where we do events. We have a case, if you want to say a caseload, we have our number of people that we're reaching out. We provide support up to 6 years after they graduate, because we know that a lot of students, especially sometimes first-gen students, don't complete in 4 years. We give them support from the time they graduate to 6 years. After 6 years, they fall off the list. And that kind of keeps our numbers down because each year we have some students that are falling off. So that's kind of what we kind of do here to support our students in that college journey. So they're really lucky, and I try to tell them like you're kind of getting more support than most students would kind of see in a traditional, like with a school counselor that doesn't give the opportunity to have this individualized support. Any other questions? Well, it was really great speaking with you guys. I hope I said something that can be helpful. Here's my contact info. Please utilize me as a resource. If you need, I don't know, whatever questions you have, connect with me. I would love that. And thank you so much for allowing me to participate, Trish and Tyler.
Thank you, Tasha. That was great. We had a lot of really good questions too. So learned a lot there. Thank you. All right. So we'll move on to our next presentation. See if we can get the...
Do I need to give up remote control?
Yes, yeah. Okay, thanks, Tasha. Okay. Trish, did you get control back? Okay. All right. So Alan and Nancy.
Good morning, everyone. Just Tyler, just requesting remote control from you, right? Just confirming.
Yeah, I think Trisha's got it.
Okay, I think it says on my screen I do have remote control. Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to allow us to speak with you today. Thanks to Trish and Tyler for having us come out today. First of all, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Alan Miramontes Flores. I'm a post-secondary access coordinator with Centro Hispano de East Tennessee. Prior to that role, I had the opportunity to work with Marable College as an admissions counselor, and then also worked with Project Grad Knoxville at Fulton High School in Knoxville, Tennessee, helping students as a college and career access coach. But definitely, I know myself and my co-panelists are very excited to talk to you today about an important topic, not only to our students, but that was important to us when we were students, but it is trying to overcome barriers in how we support our Tennessee Latinx students, especially when their dream is to reach college. And there are a lot of barriers that may present themselves, and how we've learned to overcome those through our personal experience, but also through professional practice. But I'll let Nancy introduce herself.
Thank you, Alan. My name is Nancy Gonzalez Rodriguez. I am the Family and Community Engagement Coach at Fulton High School with Project Grad Knox Education Foundation. Before that, I served as a college and career access coach here at Fulton High School as well with Project Grad Knox Education Foundation. So to get started, we thought you guys should know some quick facts about Tennessee and our Latinx students. So there are about 12% Latinx students that were enrolled in K through 12 in the 2019-2021 school year. However, we believe this has grown in the past years. Just to give you an example of how rapidly our population is growing, here in our county, our ELL family liaison stated that about 5,300 families speak Spanish and about 300 more speak a Mayan language. This translates into our college enrollment. Since our K through 12 population is growing so rapidly, then that means we're going to have more enrollment of our Latinx students enrolling into college. And this is why this topic is very important. So enrollment in 2021 was 327,462. And to break that down even smaller, 8,218 were Latinx male, 11,772 were Latinx female, and in 2001, Tennessee universities awarded 88,286 degrees. Of those, 4,392 were awarded to Latinx students, and from there, 2,000 were awarded to undocumented students. Some misconceptions that you might hear about our Latinx students. So number one, don't become overwhelmed by all the terminology out there to describe our Latino, Latinx, Latina, or Hispanic students. If you ask them, they're quick to tell you, I prefer Hispanic, I prefer Latino, or, I prefer this or that. So when in doubt, just ask our students what they prefer to go by. Number two, they're all Mexican. Yes, it is true that nearly 2/3 of our Latinx students in the U.S. are of Mexican descent, but recent migratory trends have shown that many of our new Latinx students are either from Cuba, Central America, such as Guatemala, Honduras, or they're from Venezuelan origin. And number three, eligible students, U.S. citizens or residents are eligible for federal, state, or state financial aid, even if their parents are fully undocumented. So number three, we're going to get a little bit to talk about more further in the next couple of slides, just because we do have some misconceptions about whether they're eligible for aid or not.
Thank you, Nancy. So one big barrier we face when working with our Latinx students is the big cultural differences between what it means to attend university here in the U.S. as opposed to Mexico and Latin America. Not to contradict Nancy and I are both Mexicans, so we felt a little more comfortable sharing facts about Mexico. We did do research for this presentation, and it's very similar. Many of the things that I'll mention are very similar across Latin America, but wanted to start off with this image here. Both Nancy and I attended Marable College in Marable, Tennessee. And on the right is Anderson Hall, the most historic building on campus, built around 1870. Marable College, of course, is a small private liberal arts college here in Tennessee with about 1,200 students. On the left is the UNAM Central Library. UNAM is the largest university in Mexico. It's the National Autonomous University of Mexico with almost 300,000 students. It is also the oldest university in Mexico, founded in 1521. The building there, that Central Library, is actually an UNESCO cultural heritage site, and is open to the community. So sometimes, especially with working with students, they might have completely different images of what a university or college is supposed to look like and how it's supposed to function for their students in the greater community. So to go deeper into that, overall, there are a lot of differences that can cause barriers with working with our students to understand what is important and what are the essentials to be able to go to college here in the US. So one important aspect when we're talking to students, we might be telling them, okay, you can live on campus, you can commute depending on the distance. That might be something that your school may be able to offer. Well, to a lot of our students coming from Mexico and Latin America, this is a very foreign concept. For example, here in the US, 87% of US universities offer residential housing. That even includes up to 30% of community colleges across the US that offer residential housing. While in Mexico, there are over 1,200 different institutions of higher education, and only 3 of those offer on-campus living. The cultural unit behind a family is very close to when you're in college, you stay at home. So when we're asking our students if they're wanting to move away to another place in the state or move on campus, we can get a lot of pushback from not only our students, but our families in general. Another aspect is understanding that there are so many options compared to what is available for our students. Usually in a city, there's a big regional university, and students have to apply. Usually starting their junior year, they begin applying in Mexico, and they have an entrance exam per university that they're interested in. So if they were wanting to apply to 3 different universities, they would have to complete 3 different entrance exams and submit all their information and fees to that specific admissions office. Here in the US, well, we have simplified the system a bit. Of course, you need to submit a transcript, ACT or ACT, but oftentimes we encourage our students to do a common application where you can apply to dozens of schools at a time. That can be a bit overwhelming for parents because oftentimes, the high schools in Mexico are associated with the university and specific degree you want to obtain. So that level of freedom per se of you can apply to dozens of schools with one application can be a bit overwhelming for some of our families, as well as just the whole makeup of what a degree here in the US can offer our students. So we're all used to here in the US, students start with a regular, bachelor's degree. Oftentimes can be completed in 4 years. Some students may take a bit longer, but oftentimes if our students want to pursue a professional degree, whether that's in law, medicine, want to be an engineer, want to be a psychologist, that bachelor's degree is a good foundation, but it's usually not enough. They have to obtain a master's, they have to go and get a doctorate, and it can be a lot more years of studying and residency, whatever the specific career might need. This concept in Latin America and Mexico doesn't really exist. Students often come in after they complete their high school, and they already have a general idea of what they're gonna major in. Not to say that they can't change, but oftentimes they don't. And they can complete degrees such as a bachelor's in law and a bachelor's in medicine. These usually take up to 5 years to finish, but they can begin practicing in those fields as soon as they're done with that bachelor's. While it is true, of course, they can go on to get further graduate education, like a master's and doctorate, to further specialize within those fields. If they just want to practice, standard law or general medicine, 5 years is all they need. So when we sit down and talk to our parents that a student wants to be a doctor, not that, of course, we're going to encourage them and support them, but when we mention the length that it can be to obtain that in the US, it can be a very big barrier that we have to overcome with our students. Additionally, I mean, I have a general question for the audience. Like, what does it mean to be a first generation student, right? Oftentimes we think, first generation is your parents didn't go to college or university, and you're, of course, the first generation, right? You and your siblings might be the first to go. While this is true for many of the Tennessee Latinx student parents we work with, oftentimes a lot of them didn't have an opportunity for a formal education or may have dropped out after middle school, which in many Latin American countries is when a student can drop out. If academically rigor is not there for them, maybe academics don't come easy, or family may not have enough financial support. Oftentimes after middle school, parents are dropping out and going into the workforce. So with those students, of course, parents want them to go further than them and to have the opportunities that you may have not had. So of course, those are first generation students. But what about students that, parents did go to college in their home country, whether that's in Mexico or somewhere in Latin America, maybe even obtain a higher degree than a master's or doctorate. I would argue those students are in a sense still somewhat first generation students here in the US, just because it's so hard sometimes to understand and navigate all the different complexities, whether application, that common application, ACT, SAT, FAFSA, Tennessee Promise, all that is so foreign to our families that we have a hard time overcoming that barrier for them to fully understand what that may mean. But overall, Nancy will now be able to share what other things make it hard for our Latinx students to go to college here in the state of Tennessee.
Thank you, Ellen. So what makes it hard to go in to college as a Latinx student in Tennessee? One of the first reason is ineligible students. So non-US citizens or residents must pay out-of-state tuition and are not able to receive state or federal financial aid. These students have to pay up to 3 times the price of in-state tuition rates set for public universities. So an example of that, I myself ran into this while I was in college. I was trying to get ahead and save my parents some money, and I ended up paying $5,000 for a 4-credit hour class that would have cost my peers $500 to $1,000 for that very same class. Another reason are eligible students whose parents are undocumented or have no social security number, although they are not affected by their parents' status in terms of whether they qualify or not. It could cause difficulties with financial aid. So another example of this, I had a student who I'm not going to disclose her information. This upcoming fall, she had everything set to attend her community college, and she had her schedule and everything. And since her parents are new to the States, they didn't know like how to file their taxes or that they had to file taxes. So she wasn't able to verify her proof of income. So the school told her she would have to either wait for the following semester, or she would have to herself provide some kind of income, like work and provide some kind of income for the school. We now know that if we would have talked to other people in the school, we could have helped her situation out even like better. Like the school would have worked with us, so we could have filled out some paperwork and help her out that way. Another reason students find it hard to attend college as a Latinx student here in Tennessee is we have students that live with other family members other than parents while they're moving over here, or they're simply traveling to the US to reunite with their families. In some cases, some students, they don't live with parents. They live with an aunt, an uncle. I also have a student whose family is very supportive of his educations, but we also run into situations where family is not supported and they just want them to go out there, work, so they can pay for like their food, bills, rent. We often have kids drop out because of that reason. So can ineligible students attend college? Yes. The answer is yes. Latinx students are still allowed to attend higher education institutions, even if they're undocumented. That includes if students are still in an ongoing immigration process, and always support your students. You're your student's biggest cheerleader. It's better to aspire to help them with their aspirations, even if their migration status is a barrier. I'm a proud factor that yes, ineligible students can go and continue their higher education. I graduated from Fulton High School in 2017, where the Tennessee Promise was signed when I was a freshman. I remember being in the auditorium while the governor was signing this, and I remember saying, "Oh, I'm going to have 2 years for free," and in my reality, my senior year, my counselor told me, "Hey, you actually don't qualify for those 2 years for free." And but she told me, "I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you get somewhere. I'm going to help you end up somewhere." And along with that, my Spanish teacher also got informed about what to do with the information that she was gathering. So thank you to both of them in their research and going out there. I could find a school that would accept me regardless of like my immigration status.
Thank you, Nancy. And I appreciate you sharing your story. Similar to Nancy, I was in similar circumstances myself. Just to share a little bit about me, I immigrated to this country when I was 9 years old from Mexico, not speaking a word of English, and also being an undocumented immigrant. Although I tried my best to do well in school, my paths looked different for trying to obtain higher education. I know by the time I reached senior year, although I was a very good student, I had above a 4.0 GPA, I had a 25 on the ACT. Many different doors were closing just because the path for higher education looked different for me. Due to my status, although I graduated in 2015 from Bearden High School, and this was the first year that the Tennessee Promise scholarship was being offered, there was a lot of excitement and a lot of, I felt really blessed because I thought I was going to be able to go to college for 2 years for free, and then I could transfer to the University of Tennessee, which was where I wanted to attend. Unfortunately, this was not going to be a path for me due to my status, but I had a very supportive school counselor who really advocated for me and connected me with the correct college admissions personnel to be able to find a correct path that was going to be supportive for me. So she was very transparent. She didn't overpromise opportunities to me or other ineligible students. And we understood that many traditional paths that we're used to, like Tennessee Promise or FAFSA, may not have been available. I remember her support was really learning what was truly available. I remember her coming to me one day and asking for my permission. There was going to be a workshop for school counselors where they could have an opportunity to talk to college admissions personnel about, what are changes, what are different scholarships, offer, different things like that. And she asked me, "Hey, do I have your permission to bring, I'm going to bring a letter of recommendation for me. I'm going to bring your transcript, and I'm going to bring your ACT scores, and I'm going to talk to every single college admissions personnel that's there, and I'm going to come back with information for you. I want you to know that I support you, and we're going to find a path to get to so you can achieve your college dream." If it weren't for somebody like that on my side, I don't think I'd be where I am now. Like I said, an immigrant that came here at 9 years old with no English, but now I have my bachelor's and master's degree, right? So definitely you truly can make a difference for these students. Like people like Nancy's counselor and teacher made for her, like my school counselor made for me. We definitely want you to support students, even though we know it's not an easy path going forward, right? But we're here to kind of talk a little bit more about how we can overcome some of those barriers. So I don't doubt that in every single place of higher institution in our state, there are people more than happy and willing to work with ineligible Latinx students. Unfortunately, Nancy and I have run into the road ourselves as students, and as we help students try to achieve their own dreams, that some of those paths may look a little bit different just because, not necessarily because of the people that work there, just because of some of the regulations that some of our state schools may have in terms of who they classify as eligible for in-state tuition, or who they might classify eligible for state and federal financial aid. We wanted to share a few institutions that we have found success working with and that are able to provide our students financial aid or may provide rates that are more reasonable for many of our families. The first of those would be the TCAT, the Tennessee College of Applied Technology, for students that are interested in technical or trade. This has been a really good place that we work with. Oftentimes we work closely with TCAT Knoxville, being that we're both in Knoxville. But although TCAT is governed by the Tennessee Board of Regents and it is a state institution of higher education, they do not have the in-state or out-of-state tuition rate. Rather, they have a flat rate per program. So that is very transparent as it shows our students how long that program may be. Like if we have a student interested in cosmetology, we know that program is going to be 16 months. We know what the cost of the tuition is going to be, and we know what the cost of the supplies and books is going to be for those students to participate in earn that certificate. So that oftentimes can be attainable for many of our students, and they work with the institution if they have other possibilities of a potential payment plan or other ways to be able to pay the fees for completing that program. Another option that we have found that work well with our students are private colleges. So I know Nancy and I both attended Maryville, and that's where we both graduated from, but there are many other schools that are able to help our students. You may be thinking, sometimes we might not necessarily push students to private colleges just due to how expensive they are. And not to pick on Maryville, but if we were to look on their website, you know, their cost of attendance for tuition, fees, room and board would probably be over $50,000, right? And that is not very attainable for many of the families we work with, especially for us working with Latinx students. But they do happen to have more opportunities to provide scholarships to ineligible students due to the fact that they have private endowments and private donations, rather than going through traditional federal or state resources that these students are not going to be eligible for. I know we have folks joining us from all over the state, so I wanted to ensure that I included examples from West, Middle, and East Tennessee with Christian Brothers University, Tribeca Nazarene University, and Maryville College. Nancy and I know students that are succeeding at these schools, and they were able to provide them financial aid to be able to attend at these schools. But overall, we wanted to close out with what other opportunities are out there. You know, we've been able to talk to you briefly about some of the barriers that we have experienced with working with Latinx students and on a day-to-day basis. As I work with them to help them transition to high school to college, as Nancy worked with them on a day-to-day basis at Fulton High School. Definitely being culturally competent in learning about the main differences or what is causing concern for our students, what other barriers that may be beyond the students' control are out there that are preventing them from continuing their education, and oftentimes what are going to be the best fit institutions that can truly provide the support for these students. I wanted to share, maybe some of you have already heard of the Equal Chance for Education Scholarship, but that is the biggest largest scholarship program for first-generation immigrant students here in Tennessee, and it was founded nearly 10 years ago. I know Nancy and I work with them closely on a day-to-day basis, as we have students that apply for the scholarship every year. And we have had many students that we have helped being able to obtain the scholarship in our partner colleges near us. So as of last fall, ECE supported 567 students across 15 different partner colleges across the entire state of Tennessee. We work closely with, of course, Maryville College, but also Carson Newman University, since those are the two closest to Knoxville. But there are colleges all over, you know, Northeast Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, West Tennessee, that work with these institutions in this scholarship to be able to provide opportunities for our students. And Nancy and I believe real close to what the vision of ECE is, which is that we believe that they believe that every Tennessee student deserves an equal chance to go to college, no matter where they're born. We felt strongly to include that in this presentation because we feel strongly about that when we work with our students on a day-to-day basis. And we are grateful that somebody else believed that when they were working with us, whether that was my school counselor or Nancy's teacher and school counselor when she was a student. So we definitely want to ensure that our students don't give up on their dreams because of a barrier, because of their potential lack of documentation, because of their parents' potential lack of documentation, because of any cultural differences. We want to try to bridge those gaps and ensure that they feel supported to move forward with their careers and move forward with what they are interested in pursuing. Lastly, did want to share an extra fact that may affect your students, maybe not necessarily in terms of the admissions or access to college, but once they finish, right? Prior to July 2nd, 2022, in the state of Tennessee, it only allowed immigrants or citizens who were residents to obtain professional and occupational licenses. This actually changed with the law change in July 2nd, 2022. Now in the state of Tennessee, immigrants are permitted to obtain these professional and occupational licenses as long as they have legal work authorization in the US. So that does include some immigrants that wouldn't be eligible necessarily for in-state tuition or state or federal financial aid like DACA, TPS, and immigrants in process. You know, we've run into a lot of immigrants that may have begun that process to become residents or to gain a new status, but oftentimes that can take years. So in the meantime, they can obtain a work authorization while their application is in process. So now we can encourage, we feel comfortable encouraging these students to pursue, per se, if we have that student that wants to do cosmetology at TICA, if they have that valid work permit, they can obtain a professional occupational license once they finish their certificate at TICA. Of course, they do have to meet all the other requirements to obtain those professional and occupational licenses. As a closing note, we do want to put a word of caution. Of course, not everything is perfect. You know, there are resources that are still needed by our Latinx students in all aspects, whether they're US citizens or residents or whether they are not eligible. We encourage transparency throughout our conversation. And like, for example, I want to be transparent about this law. This would not make any changes for a student that may be fully undocumented, right? A student that is fully undocumented can still attend perhaps a program at TICA and earn their certificate, but may not be able to gain that professional or occupational license. So definitely, there are still a lot of changes that can happen to continue to increase access and opportunities for all of our students. But again, we just believe that every student does deserve that equal chance to go to college, no matter where they're born. But overall, we want to thank you for your time and open it up for questions. We both have put our contact information on the presentation and would be happy to chat with anybody. As far as contact, if you have any questions, we do primarily work out of Knoxville, but would be happy to take a phone call or even a Zoom with students if you have students all over the state. But I will return control back to Tyler.
All right. Thanks, Alan and Nancy. That was a great session. Very helpful. Can you all see the questions? We've got the first one coming in.
Yes, it just popped up. So let's see. Here's the transportation. Do you have a specific word or two of advice for counselors on how best support students? Nancy, do you want to start? You're muted, Nancy.
Hold on. Yes, sorry. I guess the best way to help support your students is just be transparent with them. We talked a lot about like being transparent and don't overpromise things. We're still running into situations where we have some counselors that are overpromising things, and you know we have to we and Alan don't like to be the bad guy and, telling our students, no, you're not getting the right information. So when in doubt, reach out to people that might know a little bit more than you do. Because it is crucial for these students to know what really is out there for them. So don't overpromise them, and always be transparent with what is going on in the situations. I know some students are very cautious about whether telling you if they're about their situation. So just like be a support, and they might open up to you. By the time you might have them as a freshman, but the time they are a senior, they might open up to you. Like I had to open up to my counselors and letting them know, this is the reality of my situation. So just being there, and if they're avoiding you, it's for a reason. And that reason is because they don't know how to approach you on that situation.
Yeah, similar to Nancy, I would say it can be a hard conversation to have, especially when working with minors and working in public education, or even in the high school level, private or public. Asking those questions, like legally, we're not allowed to ask about status. But what we have found that maybe helps students open up, especially in terms of feeling more comfortable in a situation, is bringing community resources or somebody within the community that may be able to feel comfortable sharing their story. Like I know for me, I feel comfortable sharing the fact that I was an undocumented student myself. I don't expect any, high school student, even a college student to feel comfortable sharing that. But oftentimes when I go and speak to different classrooms or speak to different students, when I share about my story, oftentimes a lot of students do come afterwards, not without me necessarily prompting them to disclose this information, but they feel comfortable because they know that I have had the opportunity to understand what they've gone through, and can perhaps provide assistance or support that they might have not been able to receive yet. And then for I think I see a comment for Ana Aguirre. De nada, muchas gracias por participar. Like definitely we're excited to be able to be in this position. Like I know Nancy and I had really supportive and wonderful school counselors and teachers, but we understand the importance of, not only having that support, but whenever possible, if they can talk to somebody who might identify as a similar culture or similar background, students may feel more comfortable in that regard. If there is anybody within your school or community resources that is, especially when working with Latinx, Latino students, if there's somebody that does speak Spanish or is of that heritage. Let's see. Nancy, do you want to start with that one? The other one?
Yes. So it says, what suggestions, advice do you have when it comes to talking to families about doing their taxes? It's hard to balance between overstepping, but also wanting families to understand that opportunities that their student might not have if they do not file. So it kind of travels back to like the first question about like how do you make like those connections. I personally, like what Alan said, I talked to a lot about like my situation growing up. Like, I couldn't do certain things to file things, and I'm always letting students know, like, if I could do it, there's a door that you can do it. So it kind of like that builds up a relationship with me and the student, and then the student goes home and it tells the teacher, or tells the mom, I've met somebody in a similar situation I am, and stuff like that. Often, other students, they hear, oh, Miss Nancy, does this and that and that, and she's also she's in a similar situation our family is. So that's when I start finding out, oh, I'm born here, but my parents don't have a social security number. How can I fill out the FAFSA that way? So it's often like just building those little connections that I'm not asking. It's the student coming to me because I built those connections that now they want to know how do they fill out that FAFSA, and what do their parents need to do for them to be able to fill out that. So just, I guess, building connections with your students is what I would tell you about like trying to get them to do their taxes, and maybe even like a little workshop, just trying to find like a community partner that helps out with the Hispanic population in your county, trying to partner up with them and let them know the importance of, you know, why you should file taxes for the benefit of your student.
Yeah, just to add on what Nancy said, like we mentioned, transparency, you know, being transparent with students, and sometimes it can be that hard truth. Nancy and I often have to talk to students and support them any way we can, but there are circumstances where we're having to be the ones to tell them that hard truth. And like you said, we don't necessarily want to overstep in a student's and family's personal life, but we understand that having the tax information is going to be vital for that financial aid for FAFSA. So just like Nancy said, getting connected. We're in the unique position that we do have that cultural and personal experience. But if you don't, but still have, you know, that you have that good intention, you want to support your students, connecting with those community partners to you know, kind of explain it to the students who have to be the ones to tell them that hard truth. But is there any other questions? And of course, feel free to take both of our contact information. Happy to answer any calls or emails if about anything we discussed in general in the presentation. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Pass it over back to Tyler.
Tyler, do you have the screen control? Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you to our first two session presenters for participating this morning. We're now just going to take a short break until 10:45, the start of Catherine Wood's presentation during the next session block. So if you guys want to stretch your legs, go use the restroom, grab a coffee break, by all means, use this time to take that break, and we will be back at 10:45. Thanks. Oh, you got it.
Do you want us to log off and come back in, or no, it's just gonna stay open? I can just mute it.
We'll leave it open, but you're welcome to come and go as you please.
Yeah.
Value the work that school counselors do. And I still identify myself as a school counselor, even though now I've kind of shifted to a professor role. I just wanted to say a happy National School Counselor Week to all of y'all. I also, prior to that, was a social worker for 9 years. And so I kind of have a lot of different experiences that I draw from. But today I'm really going to be talking a lot from my own experience as a school counselor, of kind of how to prepare students for the college admissions process, and then how you can, as school counselors, kind of integrate some college programming into what you already do. Okay, so first, student engagement. So at my prior school, we had to think of, okay, how can we kind of reach every group, right? How can we reach every grade? And so with underclassmen, we did do classroom guidance with underclassmen. We went into classrooms, which I'll talk about. With 10th graders, we did what we called 10th grade talks at the beginning of our spring semester before registration started. And then with our juniors and seniors, we did individual meetings. And then we'll kind of also go through some advisement sessions that we had, and then how to really engage more in that college visit process when those college reps come and visit your campus. So the first thing is we met with our underclassmen. So ninth grade classroom guidance, we were on a block schedule. And so we would go into our ninth grade English classrooms. I did have multiple counselors at my school. We had about 1,500 kids and 4 counselors. And so we would divide that up. It usually was like 2 classrooms apiece that we would end up going into. And our presentation was really on welcome to freshman year. So really kind of starting from the jump, from kind of talking about who we are and what we do, how we differed from middle school counselors, and just kind of adding that college and career piece into it, right? Because it looks different at the high school level. And so we talked about kind of who we were, how to contact us, where we were located, right? Just kind of some basic information for them. We also went over graduation requirements and credits, what they needed, right? And I actually handed out, we would hand out every time kind of like a diploma worksheet or like a graduation checklist so they could see, okay, I'm in ninth grade, these are the classes that I'm taking. Okay, in 10th grade, this is kind of what my core is going to look like. And then these are kind of some options. So just especially for those students who are planners and who really like to think ahead and just kind of know what to expect. Coming into high school, we talked, a lot about kind of what does graduation look like, why your GPA matters, how, we start kind of calculating and looking at it for not only, kind of honors and things at the high school level, but also at the college admissions side of things, right? Like why it matters, what you're taking and what your grades are. We talked about a GPA calculation. We had at my school like a weighted versus unweighted GPA. And so we kind of talked about what that looked like. And we kind of introduced what that looked like at the college level. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But, a lot of the time students don't realize that colleges calculate GPAs differently than high schools do. And so it was just kind of an important nugget to go ahead or, plant that seed as far as this is kind of, what colleges look at, right? They may only count your academics and they may weight those academics differently depending on if it's an AP or if it's an on-level class, right? So just kind of introducing them to those concepts. We also talked about AP versus dual enrollment. And so our kids, kind of had already heard of dual enrollment because it's becoming so popular now. And so we really started talking about what does it look like for you to take an AP class? It's a college level class. It's, very structured, very standardized versus a dual enrollment class at the different universities that we had partnered with, right? What are the differences in those? Even though they couldn't take dual enrollment till 11th grade year where I was, which was in Georgia, it was still important for us to, again, kind of start those conversations, start them just kind of thinking about those things. We realized that the repetitiveness of talking to them in 9th grade and 10th grade and all of the different ways that we interacted with them really laid a really good solid foundation for when they got to those 11th and 12th grade years when they were really thinking and focusing more on the college and career process. We also talked about just general things, right? Like developing good study habits. Like a lot of them had never had to study before or didn't really realize what it would look like to study for a high school class. And so trying to just also let them know of what they kind of developing some good habits, right? And helping them kind of get on that good path to start their high school career. I have a link here too for tracking activities. And so we always would tell our students, it's much easier for you to go ahead and track the activity and what you're doing while you're doing it versus in 11th and 12th grade when you're thinking about that college application, right? Then you're going to think back to 9th grade and you're going to be like, now what club was I a part of? Or like, what did I do? Or how many hours a week did I devote to this, right? It's much easier to go ahead and start that tracking process as a 9th grader. And so this classroom guidance lesson was also really good for us to be able to speak into that and to kind of encourage them not only to get involved, but also to kind of start tracking what they're doing as they kind of progress through their high school career. We kind of promise it's going to make it a lot easier, I promise, when you get to that senior year and are trying to fill out that Common App. In 10th grade, we had what we called 10th grade talks. And so we had an advisement period for 20 to 25 minutes. And so we took a week during that advisement period and rotated through the alpha. So we divided by alpha. And so I said there were 4 of us. And so, for example, on Monday, it was Ada DA came to our like theater auditorium, that's what it's called, our auditorium, and met with their counselor. And then on Tuesday, right, DE to JI went, right? So we just kind of had that subgroup. We would call them over the announcements if you're a 10th grader, and we would tell all the advisement teachers over 10th grade, you know, kind of let them know about that week. But it was just a really quick 20, 25 minutes, reintroducing ourselves, how we can help you, what our roles are. We had registration in February, and so this was a really good time for us also to kind of talk about upcoming registration, especially as 10th graders and they go into 11th grade, right? They're thinking more about dual enrollment and work-based learning and all of these other options and opportunities for them. And so it really helped us to go ahead and talk to them in January, because our registration in February, we would get loads of emails and questions. And so it was really a time for us to say, hey, we're devoting this time to you. We're spending some time, you know, talking to you as 10th graders with just your counselor, right? It's not your entire grade. It's just your counselor that's talking to you. So it was a way for us to answer some questions, a way for us to kind of hedge our bets as far as like what we're going to get questions about. What can we go ahead and present on so that we can, you know, go ahead and kind of hopefully reduce our email load a little bit. And so those are things that we did with 10th graders. And then I will get to 11th and 12th grade in a little bit, but our advisement session. So again, we had this advisement time, right, which was really nice. And I also want to say, like, your school is going to be set up differently, right? And so this is really from my experience. And so I want you to be able to grab kind of what you can and figure out what's going to work best for you and your school, or what you feel like may be more palatable for your administration to accept or be willing to roll out, or what your bandwidth is, right? Like, what are you able to feel like you are able to do kind of within these spaces? We built up to a lot of these things. So in my 6 years that I was at my last school, I will say, like, we didn't start every year doing all of these things. We kind of built up and saw like, okay, what's helpful, what's not helpful, right? And so the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade specific things we did remained the same, but these type of advisement sessions, we kind of figured out, kind of tried it out and see how it went, see what the engagement was, to see, okay, is this something that we keep? Is this something that we kind of say, okay, we can do this in another format that's helpful? So just wanted to give that caveat. So we did have a senior session week. And so this was in the fall. And so this was really, you know, when they're kind of thinking about applying. It was before the first big deadline of October 15th. So we would have this like mid-September. And so what we did is during that advisement session, again, 20 to 25 minutes, and we divided it up between counselors. So one counselor, again, we had 4, so it worked out really well for a week, right? So that Monday we would say navigating the Common App, and Common App has really good, just kind of guides for first year students and that application process. And so we would invite them to, we were a one-to-one school, so we did have laptops for every student. So we would invite them to bring their laptop. Even if you don't have laptops for your students, if you're not a one-to-one school, it's still really helpful for you to just kind of go through this information with them on navigating the Common App, what that looks like, what the different pieces of it are. This is also a really good time to remind them that in 9th grade, you told them to start tracking their activities. And so it's going to make the process now a lot easier, right? If they've been doing that. Tuesday, a counselor would talk about organization and timeline, right? Like, how do you kind of organize this process? There's a lot of different deadlines and verbiage between early action and early decision and regular decision, right? And so kind of how do you organize yourself, and how do you create a timeline for yourself on how I get these letters of rec, how I get these essays done, when I have to turn certain applications in, right? Kind of I would always say, like, you want to take control of as much of the process as you can, right? And so just like with organizing your classes and figuring out kind of how you manage all of the responsibilities in your classes, the college process is similar in that way, right? So how can you say, okay, I have these 3 schools due on October 15th, this school on November 1, and these 3 schools on December 1, right? Like, how can you kind of take control of that process and organize yourself and help yourself with the timeline of it all? Wednesday was letters of recommendation. And so we talked about that process. We talked about how to request a letter of recommendation, and I'll show you kind of a template a little bit later in the presentation that we had for students to give to teachers, where the students had to answer questions and then give it to the teachers. We always spoke to students about how you ask, right? You aren't telling a teacher that you have, oh, look at you, you're so lucky, I have nominated you to write me a recommendation. No, you are asking if the teacher would be willing to write you a recommendation. You are also giving that teacher an abundant amount of time to finish that recommendation, because you also recognize as a student that teachers write recommendations for multiple students. And just like the deadlines you have, they also have different deadlines, not only for their regular job, but also for the letters of rec that they have agreed to write. And so letters of recommendation, we really just talked about kind of courtesy and respect. I mean, we even kind of broke it down to how to write an email or how to go and physically talk to a teacher about the letter of rec. A lot of times, I'm sure you have noticed that students now kind of write emails like they text. And so we kind of went over the formality of, this is how you kind of approach this, right? Like, this is it, there needs to be a lot of respect and consideration for the teacher's role in this. And then on Thursday, we talked about essays. And so just essay writing and what that looks like, how to write a good essay, how to answer the questions on the prompt. I think sounds very simple, but I feel like a lot of students have their ideas and then they try to fit too much in an essay, or they don't actually answer the question that the college is asking. And then Friday was just an opportunity for any student that had any other questions. All counselors tried to be available. And so that was just kind of a question and answer. So we left Friday to, you kind of come to some of these sessions, and now let's chat about, any remaining questions that you have. We also held an advisement session on military service academies. We wanted to encourage students to, think about the military service academies, the USNA, the Naval Academy, West Point, and Air Force Academy. We wanted to encourage students to start thinking about those options and start to kind of consider that those are, fantastic options for some of our students. And so we did have a session on military service academies. And then we would do what's called a lunch and learn. And so a lunch and learn is, not in advisement. It's not during academic time. It's during their lunch. And so we would have a lunch and learn. I was in Georgia. And so we would have a lunch and learn on UGA and Georgia Tech, because those were our 2 huge state kind of schools that people would be applying to. And they were also highly selective. And so we wanted to make sure that our students kind of knew specifically about their process if they were applying to either of those schools. And so, here in Tennessee, that would obviously probably look different. You all wouldn't want to do a lunch and learn on Georgia or Georgia Tech. But the schools that that your students commonly apply to the most commonly, and, think about like the highly selective schools that students are applying to, doing a lunch and learn. They choose to come, they eat their lunch, and then they learn about, that school specifically and what their process looked like and what their, kind of classes look like. And then we also did one for teachers. And so we would do one for teachers, either during planning or during their lunch, on recommendation. So one of the incentives for coming is that we asked our principal if they could have an extra jeans pass, which jeans day at our school was like a really big deal. Our teachers loved to have an extra jeans day. And so we said, as a teacher, if you write recommendations, we would love to invite you to this. And you will get an additional jeans pass. And so, just thinking of little but free ways, if, possible, to incentivize kind of teachers to come and learn about those things. And we just kind of talked about recommendations from the teacher's point of view, what to include, what that looks like for students. And so we told our 11th and 12th grade, and I do have a link here, but I'm afraid to click on it because I don't want y'all to then not see it and us have Zoom issues. So there is a letter that I have linked. I don't know if these slides are sent out, but if they are not, then please contact me and I will definitely get that to you by contacts at the very end. But we would tell our students, you need, for a letter of rec, you need an 11th or 12th grade academic teacher, right? So one from those core areas. Not saying that band or art or drama is not important, but, or a coach, right, or not important, but if a school is asking for a recommendation, or even if it's optional, that academic teacher should be your first letter of rec. That can speak to, they really need to be able to, when talking to the student, they need to be able to speak to engagement in the classroom, what your peer interactions are, what your work ethic looks like in that classroom, how you show initiative in that classroom, right? And so students may like a teacher, but it really is their teacher that you have a good relationship with, that you have really demonstrated and had some interactions with, right? In the classroom, they've really seen how you have worked, seen how you've engaged, see how you kind of collaborate, with others. And so those pieces are just really important. Secondarily, if there is a second letter of recommendation, that can be the band teacher, the art teacher, the academic, or the coach, right? But that first one really needs to be from an 11th or 12th grade academic teacher. And that really needs to be the first. And then secondarily, that other teacher can really speak into some spaces that academic teacher hasn't seen, right? Just with the nature of, for example, how band is, and if they were in band all 4 years, right? That can really add to speaking about the student and their growth. The counselor, I always used to tell my students, I want to give context to your transcript, right? And you can definitely do this as far as the student can definitely do this in a supplemental essay or the optional kind of information at the bottom that they want to share. But if there is something that you want me to give more context to, right? So if you were in AP classes your 10th grade year, and then all of a sudden your 11th grade year, you went from 4 APs to 1 AP, but your grades look like you did pretty well in those APs, right? Like, how can I give context to that, right? If I'm a college admissions advisor or admissions counselor, and I am looking at your transcript, I'm trying to make sense of it, right? I'm trying to understand why you made some of the choices that you made, why you chose some of the classes that you chose, right? And so that can be really helpful. Also, counselors can really speak into students, are only allowed to take this many AP courses their freshman year, or, this student wasn't allowed to go into this course for this reason, or schedule conflict, right? The student requested more of a rigorous schedule, but due to, schedule constraints, like the student wasn't able to, right? That still gives some context. And then specific examples of, who they feel like they are as a person, who they want to showcase, that they don't feel like there's a space in their application that they're able to do that. The counselor is a really good catch-all in that way. In talking to admissions counselors, bullet points can be really helpful, right? They have a crazy amount of applications to read. And so being in paragraph format is not always super helpful. And so bullet points can be helpful because as they are reading and skimming, right, they usually have 5 to 7 minutes per application, and that's the total application. So in their review, those bullet points can really be helpful to have some succinct points that you are trying to make and point out about the student. And so those are just some kind of helpful hints that I have learned from college admissions counselors as well. So essays, the format isn't formal. So there doesn't need to be, it's not a 5-paragraph essay situation. And it's also really important that the students don't over edit. Sometimes when students talk to their parents or teachers or counselors or whoever, right? They're like, oh, especially sometimes parents, right? With good intentions, but sometimes they can lose their voice in the editing process. And so it's not a bad idea for them to have a person who looks at it, right? But sometimes there's too many cooks in the kitchen, right? And so just want to make sure that that student realizes that this is their voice. That's what the college admissions counselor really wants. They want to know, who is this person, right? And if they're evaluating you on paper, so you want to make that as real life and realistic as possible, of who you are and what you want them to know. Like I mentioned earlier, answer the question, right? Don't get caught up in the weeds of it. And I also think that being more specific is better than being broad. And so thinking of, the essay may be like, think of a time where you overcame an obstacle, right? Like, not talking about your entire life, talking about this one specific time in this class when you were really struggling and you overcame it and how you did that, right? Like, that is a very specific example that the student can utilize, and not speak in generalities, really speak in specificity. The optional supplemental, sorry, those are my dogs. The optional supplemental essay is always something that the student needs to look at and engage with, and really take the time to think about what information they have not said somewhere else that they really need to say, or they really need to include. This is their shot, right? This is their chance to talk to the admissions counselors, to be able to kind of share something about them, right? And so my last bullet point, I'm going to skip and then come back. My last bullet point says university knows student wants to be there, right? But if they make a point about the university, ensure that it's super specific. So a lot of times this optional essay, or optional things, students may say, but I really want to come to your school, right? I really want to be there. Well, the admissions officers knows that, right? Like, you've applied to their school. They know that you want to be there. But if there is a specific research opportunity that is only available at that school, is there a specific professor that studies a very certain thing that they know that they want to engage with, or are really excited to engage with, right? Those are things that they could point out. The student needs to have their essay be about them, not about others. So a lot of times, if a student is talking about, my grandmother died and I was really sad about that, and she was so important, it starts to become about the grandmother, right? Or about their life and about the grandmother and her impact. It's not really as much about the student, right? So it needs to be student focused. They want to know about you. They don't want to know about your family member. As lovely as I'm sure your grandmother is or was, they really want to know about you, right? So how that death impacted you is fine, but then turning it to kind of talk more about the characteristics of your grandmother and why she was so important isn't as helpful, right? And so really focusing on, this is what I gleaned from this is what I gained from knowing her and loving her, right? Like, I have become this person, I want to seek out these things, right? The kind of keeping that voice centered on the student. Some two common kind of things that students talk about are mission trips, torn ACL or sports injuries, and then admissions counselors. This is from summer seminar. Some of these points for the letters of recommendation and essays. I went to summer seminar a few years ago and found it to be very, very helpful. And so one of the things was, the admissions counselor said, if I hear one more, I thought I was going to help, but they helped me. They're like, I've heard that so much, right? It kind of becomes this cliche. And so really speaking with students about, have you thought about what you're going to write in your essay? And really thinking through, is it going to showcase, again, who you are? Or are you trying to tailor an essay to what you think they want you to talk about, right? And so a sports injury is a big thing, right? It can end a career. We totally understand that. And so I'm not saying never use it. I'm just saying, just be mindful of what other things happened due to that injury that impacted you as your life or your character, or how you overcame an obstacle, right? Like, what can you kind of glean from that in order to write an essay that is different from the typical, I tore my ACL and, and my soccer career was ended kind of deal. So those are just some suggestions about kind of in what we talk to students about in that letter of rec, and to teachers about in the letter of rec, and then in the essay section. Oop. So individual meetings with juniors. And so we met with each junior in the spring, and we would usually open this up. We would have 10th grade talks middle of January, and then we would open up junior meetings right after that. And we used a Pointlet. It's a free thing that we got to use. There is a paid version, but you for us, we could, do the basics and have that. And so we would have them schedule appointments. We would send them an email, say, this is what, it's time for your junior meetings. We would tell the advisors, the junior advisors, and then they would sign up for a time. And so these are the types of things that we would discuss. We would discuss summer and senior year, right? Like what registration looks like, if they are going to do dual enrollment, what that looks like for them, if they're going to do work-based learning, what that looks like, what those processes are like, right? What they need to be doing to prepare for those things. We also talked about post-secondary plans, and we always framed it as post-secondary plans because kid is going to college, right? So we wanted to make sure that our students who are joining the military or going to work, who don't intend to go to a 2 or 4-year school, they also knew that the junior meeting still applies to them. It's not just for college going juniors. And so we talked about college visits, and these are two checklists that I got. The first one is campus visit checklist. That's from NACAC. And it just kind of talks about how to utilize your campus visit in the most productive way, right? Things to see on campus, things to engage with, and then questions to ask us from College Essay Guy. And he kind of breaks it down in different chunks of, when you're asking about academics versus when you're asking about social life versus when you're asking about the admissions process, right? Like he breaks it down, which is really great. We also talked about SAT, ACT. And even if it was optional at some of the schools they were applying to, right? Like if they needed to take it, if they didn't, kind of where they kind of sat with all of that. And then we began talking about recommendations and formatting that college list. So some juniors will come in and they will be like, I'm applying here. This is where I want to go. These are my lists. This is who I'm going to ask, right? And some juniors are like, I haven't even thought about that. And so that's why we just kind of began those discussions. A lot of these things are, again, planting those seeds with our students. And in that email that we sent to them, we had them fill out a questionnaire before meetings. We wanted them to fill out a questionnaire listing their honors and awards, their clubs, athletics, and extracurriculars, right, with this specificity. If they had work experience, and that includes summer, right? Like how are you spending your summer? Community service, and then hobbies and interests. Now, if they've been doing this since the 9th grade, then this should be very easy for them, right? They should have started to keep up with this stuff 2 years ago. So, and if they haven't, this is really a time where you, again, revisit that and say, okay, now junior year, you have put all of this together, keep doing that, right? But it also informs us if we haven't really spent a lot of time with the junior, because a lot of times my juniors would come in and I hadn't met with them, like I didn't really know them. I hadn't met with them before, right? Having a caseload of 400 students, you just don't get to know all of your students like you want to. And so this junior meeting was really a time for me to get to know them and them to get to know me if they hadn't already. And for me to kind of see what they were involved in, what kinds of things that they did, what areas were they not as involved in, right? And kind of ways that we can think about, different ways to get engaged and be engaged. And then with seniors, we met with them in the fall. So we met with them and we would open this up after schedule changes. And so we would open this up. Our goal was always by the end of August, because again, that first big deadline for us was October 15th. And so we knew, that September time is really important for that application process. And so, by the latter half of August, we would try to open this up once we caught our breath from schedule changes. And so we would meet with each of them. We would have them fill out a questionnaire, which I'll go over, but we also, we would talk about kind of the application process of applying to college in the Common App. We would revisit their college list. We would talk about their timeline, recommendations, essays. We would go over SAT, ACT again. We would talk about college visits if they had done some over the summer, from their junior meeting. We would just kind of revisit some things from the junior meeting just to kind of follow up, right? So it was a good time for us to say, this is kind of where you were in your junior meeting. Where are you now? Kind of where's your thought process and what are you thinking? The questionnaire we had them fill out for this meeting was different, right? So we wanted to know more about them. And we would always say, if you don't fill out the questionnaire before your meeting, it will impact your recommendation. And that wasn't to be mean, right? But it was also to hold them a little bit accountable. And it was to say, even if you don't understand the method to the madness, there is a method, right? Like there is a reason I'm asking you these questions. And when you come to me and ask me for a recommendation, because the school you're applying to requires a counselor recommendation, which many schools do, then it's important for me to be able to know you well enough to write about you, know you well enough to be able to say things about you and distinguish you from other students. And what I would always say to students is teacher recommendations, you get to choose those, right? Like you get to kind of choose who writes that, right? Out of the history teachers you've had in 11th and 12th grade and math and English and science and foreign language, like you get to choose those. Your counselor, you don't really choose, right? Like you're with me for 4 years. And so your engagement with me matters, right? Because me getting to know you and getting to know who you are, a college is hearing from somebody that you have a really great relationship with and have spent a lot of time in the classroom with. And then the college is also asking for your counselor, right? Who you either have really engaged with and I've engaged with you and we've had a really good rapport and relationship, or we haven't, right? And so I need to really be able to try to speak on that as much as I can. And so it also helped to elicit discussion, right? So favorite class and why that was your favorite class. It's always interesting to see what kids loved, why they loved it, right? Especially if it was a class that, or in a subject area that they didn't particularly historically love. And then they're like, oh no, I like that ended up being one of my favorite classes and I didn't expect it. And it's also interesting to see what aspects of the class that they really enjoyed. If we asked your best friend, what would they say are, kind of your top 3 traits or characteristics? And so it's also just interesting for them to reflect on, who am I? Who would my friends kind of say that I am? And I think that that gave us a good idea too of how they are viewing themselves, right? Like, how are they seeing themselves? We also asked, how has our community changed because you were here? And we gave examples of that because our kids a lot of times would say, our community hadn't changed that with me being here. And we're like, yes, you have. Like, yes, it has, right? Like you've been a part of a club or an extracurricular or an athletic team, or you've been in band since you were a freshman. Like the community has changed because of your impact, right? And so it was also because students have a really hard time talking about themselves and feeling like they're bragging on themselves. So part of the reason for this question too was you're going to kind of have to brag on yourself a little bit in those essays, right? You're going to have to talk about your resiliency and your grit and your determination and all of the ways that you have engaged with some hard things or with some difficult times in your life. And so this is kind of a precursor to that, right? Like, let's really think about and reflect on, how you have made an impact of where you are, right? And that's going to really help them then when they go to write that essay and they're like, God, I just feel like I'm like bragging on myself all the time, right? Like they've kind of gotten a little bit of practice with that. What your plans are after high school, so college and career aspirations, and then what questions do you have? And so them filling out this questionnaire on, what questions they have about the college application process also was really helpful for us to know where they are in their kind of thinking about it. And if they have questions, what questions they have. And so that kind of also helped us in the meeting just to say, okay, this is kind of a starting point. And then during our conversation, obviously other questions would come up as well. And I always encouraged my seniors, I said, this is not a one and done. You will have other questions that come up when you're actually in the process. So don't hesitate to email me or come to that senior week of, learning about the Common App or essays or recommendations or things like that. So connecting with college reps. So rep visits was a great system that we used that was free, that we used for contacting college reps. My school now or the old school I was at, now uses SCORE. And so, but before that we used rep visits and it was fantastic. Right. And then they, provided us kind of a breakdown. And so you could put it, on your website, send it to senior advisors, send it out to the seniors of like, these are the colleges that are coming. From what I've learned, it's really important to make those college reps feel welcome. They have traveled to come to your school, right? They have certain kind of quotas that they have to meet of how many schools they visit and how, what those visits are like. And so it's really important just to make them feel welcome and make them feel like you were excited for them to be there. And that doesn't take very much, right? Like just going and introducing yourself like, hey, I'm Dr. Wood. I'm one of the counselors here. And we are so happy to have you. Can I get you a water? Do you need anything from me? We had we kind of tested different ways for students to sign up. Before SCORE, we would have, students sign up, like try to sign up. It was old school, like pen and paper, right? This school's coming. Why don't, come to the counseling office and sign up? Once we had SCORE, they were able to go on and register. And then we also, if a school came and we knew that there were students, but they weren't showing up, then we would kind of go through our list and then call those students out of class and say, hey, and again, this is during advisement when we had our college rep, so it wasn't missing class time. But we would say, hey, like you expressed interest in, this university. So I need, come up and talk to the rep. Like we remember this is the rep that is here today to talk about it. And this is a lot of time the rep that is going to also be reading your application. And so getting that FaceTime with the rep is an important thing. I think in going back to making them feel welcome, it's also good because they can tell you about new initiatives or programming that's happening at their school, or things that they are excited about, give you, infographics and brochures and stuff about their school. We always felt like advisement time was a lot better usage of the time than a lunchroom visit. So our lunches, I mean, we had 4 lunches, right? That's a 2-hour time period. Our kids weren't as engaged with a lunchroom visit. They wouldn't, even when it was us during registration, like they just don't come talk to you. They don't come engage with you. They don't ask you questions. The lunchroom is kind of a crazy place. And our school students could eat inside, outside. And so it also just didn't capture really the students that we felt that the reps were hoping to engage with and hoping to talk about. And so that advisement time was that's what we used. And we felt like that was a much better environment for the quiet kid, for the shy kid, for a smaller group that was really focused on, hey, I really want to hear about your school specifically. And so we would have advisement time and we utilized that. And I feel like our reps preferred advisement time over lunchroom. I think lunchroom visits can be hard for them. I know I don't want to sit in a lunchroom for 2 hours and try to engage with students. I mean, I think I would much rather, right? Like invite some students to listen to something in a smaller capacity. And so just in thinking about that and how you can make it more accessible and just a pleasant experience for your admissions rep, I think is also, they will also appreciate that. And then we would have journalism and a yearbook student come. And so a lot of times sometimes with our smaller schools, we didn't have as much, they may not have been well known or they may not have had as much interest. And so we would contact our yearbook or our journalism teacher and said, hey, can you send a student down? And we want them to be able to really talk to the admissions rep and then write something up and put in our school newsletter. And so in the college visit, in our school newsletter, we would have like upcoming college visits and then like a little blurb, right? If there was like a highlighter or focusing on a school. If we didn't have a ton of student engagement, that was still a way that we could communicate to this college rep. We're very happy you're here. We want our students to know about you and your programming. And so that student really would come down and ask some questions, right? And they're getting some of that journalism experience that they need to and want to have. And then they're also writing up a little blurb and putting it in the school newsletter. And that really goes to developing those leadership skills and developing those skills, for the student as well. So that was something too that we did if there wasn't as much interest or wasn't as much engagement that we would do. So some external resources that I'll go over are some college admissions blogs, common data set, and then some college admissions events. So the first is a college admissions blog. So again, I'm from Georgia. So Georgia Tech has a fantastic admissions blog. I would encourage you to follow it, even if you are not in Georgia, right, which y'all aren't, or even if you don't have students applying to Tech. Rick Clark has really led that blog, and he talks about all sorts of topics, right, from parent engagement and advice for them, for student advice of like what to write about or how to seek out a recommendation, right? Like he talks about a whole host of different things. The University of Georgia blog, I also think is a really good blog, and they if you have kids that end up applying to Georgia, like they'll put, these are the essay topics that we have announced, and they'll announce them in May, and then they'll, be available in August. And so some blogs will really be able to provide you a lot of information and provide a lot of tips. And it's just good for the student to be able to engage with some of those things. They provide insights to the college application numbers for that institution. So in UTK's blog, right, they're like, this is what we've had in this past year. This is kind of the average of SAT, ACT, average GPA, right? This is kind of, we've seen an uptick here, an uptick there. So it just gives you more context, right? Gives you more context for when they're going to release decisions, and what kind of trends that they're kind of seeing. And so, I would just encourage you to, as the counselor, to look at some of the schools that your kids apply to, and just think about, okay, is there a blog that, the admissions office has that I can follow? They usually don't inundate you with, things on your email, but it can just really help kind of inform you of the process as well. And then it's also a great place for you to point the students if they have questions or if they're applying to certain schools. College Essay Guy is phenomenal. He has paid services, but as you can see on my screenshot, he has a ton of free resources as well. He really can provide a ton of information for both you and students, right? On building a college list, for writing personal statements, for essays, for the financial aid topic. If you have international students in your building applying to US schools, right? Like he really has a wealth of information, and a ton of depth and breadth, of information that I feel like has been helpful for me as a school counselor, but also for my students. And so that you don't also have to be kind of the expert in all the things. You can say, hey, there's this really great resource that you can go to, that can really give you a breakdown of what this looks like, or kind of help them focus. And sometimes it's helpful to give parents these resources, because then they sometimes can be a little overbearing in the process, or college has changed a ton since they have applied. And so it's really helpful for them to also kind of feel like they have a place to go, to help them kind of understand what this process looks like. Especially for parents, there is a resource called Grown and Flown. And it is a blog that started by these parents, and it has kind of now grown, right? And so they have a specific college admissions section, but they also have a section for parenting and for when your student goes to college, right? And so I think, for parents, this can be a really great resource. There's a lot of free resources. There's a ton of advice and different perspectives on how to handle the process. And they are from parents. So parents are blogging, about this process for them and kind of what worked and what helped. And so it can really, there are going to be some teen specific things, but also, some college student, young adults, whether you're a parent kind of in the teen stage, in the college stage, or in the post-college stage. So this college admissions section has everything from, acceptance, applying, visiting, and what kind of happens or what to do with the college decision process, as well as paying for college. Common Data Set. I don't know if y'all know about Common Data Set. It is probably one of my favorite resources, because as you have seen on these, I snapshotted UGA just again, because that's what I'm very familiar with. But a lot of times in the infographics or in the things that you receive from schools, they will have kind of an infographic of this is our snapshot, right? And so they have gathered this data and kind of, shown you the quick and dirty of kind of what that looks like. And so what Common Data Set does is it really gives you a greater context to those snapshots. So it provides information for counselors, students, and families. And so as you can see in the first, it tells you, how many people applied to the university, which I think kind of the breakdown of that, which I think is really important. And you can kind of see what their admittance rate is, right, by doing that math. If they have a waiting list, how they kind of utilize their waiting list. So you can see for Georgia, and this is the previous year, right? So for the 2022-2023 year, you're advising for class of 2024, but you're looking at the previous year, is, you can see how like over 3,000 students were offered a place on the UGA waiting list. 34 were admitted, right? So I think wait lists are not a bad thing, but I think it's also just, it's again, providing that context for parents and students. The other thing I love is that they provide you with what the university deems most important, considered, not considered. And so again, this can also kind of debunk some myths, and it can help the student know at this university, this is what they're focused on, versus at this university, they also are focused on this. And so at Georgia, it's the rigor of your record and your academic GPA. And so again, this is a really good conversation on, it says academic GPA, right? So those band classes, those CTE classes, those things are not going to be counted in that GPA. It is going to be an academic GPA, and they weight that academic GPA. At Georgia, it's 5% for honors and 10% for AP or academic dual enrollment. And so knowing that at my school, you may have a 3.8 GPA, but when they recalculate your GPA, it's going to look different because of how they weight and place emphasis on the rigor that you have done. And then as you can see, kind of what they think is important, considered, and not considered. Something else on common data set. So you'll see like the blurb of like average 30 ACT, average 1339 SAT. And this is the breakdown, right? So they give you the average, they give you the snapshot. And then what I love about common data set is it legitimately breaks it down from the composite to the math and then EBR, and then the ACT, math, English, and composite, right? And then it does it even further with actual score ranges, like what they scored, and what the percentage of students that were admitted had. And then you'll see like 4.13 average weighted GPA, and then they, break that down even further. And so again, it's just really helpful information for your parents and students. They will come in with some knowledge sometimes that you're like, I don't understand really where they're getting their numbers or they're getting their information. And so common data set to me really helps to say, these are the numbers that are from this certain university. And so you can Google, right? Like you can say University of Tennessee, Knoxville common data set, or right? You can you can Google whatever the school is in common data set, and it will come up for you. And so just wanted to also talk about counselor specific events. So this is from UTK's website, the Breakfast with the Counselors, right? And so I think that's another part of why it's important to engage with not only the college reps when they visit your school, but also just looking at their websites, their blogs, things like that. I think there are a lot of opportunities to, like UTK, for example, may have this breakfast, or there may be an online session for 4 or 5 different schools that you can attend. And so it really provides you an opportunity to meet with other counselors, to speak with admissions, to really let your school be one of the schools represented, right? Like we are a representation of our school and our students. And so we want admissions people to know about us. We want admissions people to know why visiting our school is important, why we have dynamic students that would be fantastic for their institution. And so by attending these events, you're putting that school name on the map for them, right? Because there's a lot of different schools in Tennessee. And so how are you kind of advocating for your school to be one of the schools that a counselor visits, or that you can, get more insight into their process for the benefit of your students as well. So these breakfasts, whether it's a breakfast, a lunch, an online event, you really get to gain information on admissions trends, deadlines, on new programs. A lot of times they'll give you some swag or give you some things that you can take back to your school, which are super helpful. And then with SACAC, I have done summer seminar, like I mentioned earlier. They have a counselor participation fund that I have applied for and gotten as a school counselor. So those are just things that I would also encourage you to seek out. The Sweet Tea Tour, I think this year is in South Carolina. Last year it was in Tennessee, but this year is in South Carolina. And so the Sweet Tea Tour is just a really good opportunity for you to tour different schools. It's much easier for you to talk just about different schools with your students once you visited. It's been amazing to me, the college visits that I've gotten to go on, how I can really see some of the differences between the schools, or I will go to a visit and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I completely see how this specific kid on my caseload really does or really could fit here, right? What programs do they have? What are their initiatives, right, that they have for students? And if you work with certain populations, right, we've talked about first gen, we've talked about Latinx, we've talked about African-American students today, right? Like what kinds of programs do they have for those students, if that is a population that you are passionate about and that you have a lot of in your school, right? So kind of thinking and sifting through just the programming that they have, the different options for your students that they have, I think can be really helpful for you to just engage with and kind of learn more about. And then Advocacy Day, we have next Thursday, so just in over a week on the 15th. it is a fantastic opportunity for you to speak to a legislator about why your job is important, and why what you do not only makes a difference in kids' lives every single day, but how you impact not only the students that you work with, but also the larger school community. Kind of going back to our students having trouble bragging on themselves, we as school counselors kind of can sometimes have trouble bragging on ourselves, right? And the things that we do. And so whether you are a school counselor or a counselor at a private high school or on the college side, we would love for you to come to Advocacy Day, and really represent where you're from and get to talk to a legislator about school counselor to student ratios, that we feel is really important, that we get to that 250-to-1 ratio to be able to serve our students in the best way possible. And so those are just some SACAC programs that I wanted to promote that I have been a part of. And so I don't promote them because SACAC has told me to. I promote them because those are things that I have been a part of and I have really gained a lot from and have really increased my kind of level of knowledge on the college admissions process as a high school counselor. And then some other ideas that I'll just go over as well, where student parent nights, staff education, final transcript request, how you can kind of use that in a college application to your benefit for college application, and then some senior activities that we did. So student parent night, so we would have a dual enrollment night, and then we would also kind of work in there. Half of it would be College 101. So just kind of given the nuts and bolts of College 101. And then the other half would be dual enrollment. And so we promoted this to 9th to 11th grade. And we presented about the dual enrollment process, and then also shared kind of the number of students who are dual enrolled. And those numbers were also to let our parents and students know that dual enrollment has gotten to be such a big monster of a process that your school counselor has kind of been inundated with it, right? And so to have patience with us as we process dual enrollment, as we go through dual enrollment things, that we have a lot of students in our school taking dual enrollment. We would say the number of classes that they're taking across the institutions that we were partnering with. And so those were just helpful, I think, context and kind of a plug for us, like, hey, be really kind and patient and gracious with your school counselor, especially about your dual enrollment kind of needs and questions. And then we would invite our dual enrollment representatives for breakout sessions. And so parents got to choose, kind of some parents and students got to choose kind of the breakout sessions that they went to. So we had 4 different schools that we partnered with. And so you had 2 breakout sessions. So you would be in the large auditorium for kind of our spiel about dual enrollment. And then you would have these breakout sessions where you get to choose 2 of the schools that, as your child is thinking of applying to, or as the student you are applying to. And we always reinforce that this should be a student-driven process, right? That parents should not be filling out applications for their student, or should not be completing this process for their student. It is a really great precursor to them applying for college. In College 101, we went over the basics of that college admissions process, and timeline. Financial aid night, that's a typo, that goes down. And then we would have, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we would have college boot camp. For seniors, we would hold it in August before all those fall sports started. We shifted from our week-long advisement lessons to this. And so again, me kind of going back to talking about picking and choosing kind of what's most helpful. They were similar to our week-long advisement lessons, and you can kind of choose what to do for your office, but it was over recommendations and essays, and we would have people from the college side come and talk to our students for our college boot camp. It was on a Saturday morning from like 9 to 12. So it was a great way to kind of engage those seniors. We would have parent info night. We had 9th and 10th grade and 11th and 12th, and there was always kind of with like our 9th and 10th graders, like going ahead and kind of putting those seeds in about FAFSA and GPAs and college, college things, right? Just kind of like going ahead and talking about, the importance of choosing classes and what that looks like and rigor and all of those things. So kind of talking about those things on parent night in 9th and 10th, and then 11th and 12th was focused more again on those post-secondary options. Financial aid, we had a representative from the state come to speak with parents. And then we were there to support if the student wanted to apply or wanted to start that financial aid process. They could bring their computer, or we would be in the media center with them and their computers if they wanted to sit and kind of start the process Because that's, as you all know, for FAFSA, it can be a beast of a process. Staff education. So this was just really, this is just things that we did. We provided all of our teachers and administrators and counselors with a pennant with the words about ask me about my education. And then they would fill it out. We had colorful markers. They would fill it out and then they would post it outside of their classroom. It's just a good way for student engagement, a good way to see kind of that their teachers all didn't go to the same school, that there was kind of a breadth and a depth of where their teachers went, of the degrees that they had, right? And just kind of providing students an opportunity for conversations if they're interested in a specific college or interested in a specific place, that they can see, oh, Mr. Mayhew went to North Georgia, so I would love to ask Mr. Mayhew about North Georgia and his experience there, right? So it just kind of created some conversation, creating that college and career culture in our school. Our final transcript request form, we had a Google form that they would fill out, filling out obviously where they wanted their transcript to go, but we would also ask additional questions, plans after high school, where they have applied and where they were admitted to. And then we would utilize that to create our school profile. And so we would utilize that information to build that list. So you can see from my previous high school, that or that class of 2023 college acceptances, we had that list and then bolded were places that they were attending. And then we had as well, if you can see, it's pretty small, but it says class of 2023 profile, and it tells 4-year, 2-year, college, and then military work. And that is also a school profile is really helpful for college admissions staff to kind of understand, what your breakdown is, how many students are going to 4-year or 2-year colleges, right? What does that kind of look like for your school? It just gives them more, information about kind of what your school looks like and what those rates are. And then lastly, we did senior spotlight and senior celebration day. So we started senior spotlight in COVID, and then they loved it so much we kept it. And so it was a Google form that students filled out. They would put their favorite school tradition. We were the Titans, so it was a favorite Titan tradition. Staff shout out. So again, staff, so not just teachers. So this is an opportunity for you to point out anybody in the school. We always really loved it when our students would recognize our custodial staff, and others in the school that didn't always get all of the love and recognition that they deserve. And then plans after high school. So this started after spring break, that we would start posting. So we put it up after, like, they came back from spring break, we sent it to all our seniors. And then we had like a little Canva thing where we would post it until senior celebration day. And there was a caveat on the senior spotlight by saying, like, you're filling this out, saying that it's okay for us to post your picture. It's okay for us to post all of this information about you. And then senior celebration day, May 1st, used to be like the college hard deadline. And so we would ask staff to wear their shirts from their alma mater. We would have a backdrop from athletics, and we would set up in our kind of commons area, and we would post on social media. So we were wanting to just celebrate our seniors and where they were going and what they were doing. And this was for everybody, right? So if we had I don't know if you can see on that table, we had a whiteboard that said, I'm entering into, they have their Army shirt and they're entering into the Army, or I'm going to work for my dad at the as an electrician, or whatever it was. They could also write on that whiteboard. If we didn't have the college pennant, or they were not going to a 4-year school that we did have, then they would be able to write. And it was just a way for us to celebrate them, and for them to kind of know that we were championing them and their post-secondary plans. So I know that was a lot of information and I'm out of time. But if you have any questions, you ever need anything, any of the resources I mentioned, any further conversation, I am happy to talk to anybody about it. I really loved my time as a school counselor. And so this is my email at Tennessee Tech. And so if y'all ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Catherine. That was great information, especially for counselors that might be new.
I know it's a lot, so.
No, that was great. Looks like we have a few questions in the chat if you're able to see those.
Yes, I am. So how do you encourage teachers to write a letter of rec based on their interaction with the students and not a resume? Yeah, so part of I can send this to you, but the part of the letter of recommendation request form that we had for students, it would ask them questions about that class specifically. And so it really gave the teachers a jumping off point. And we also talked to our teachers about, we here, and again, I learned this at summer seminar, there is admissions reps can see the difference between private schools and public high schools. And the kind of copy and paste nature sometimes that high schools in the public arena do when you have multiple students that you're writing recs for. And so part of it was an education on, we want it to be as individualized as possible for those students. And so it's really speaking to those teachers of, you know, those our private school friends with lower caseloads are able to really tailor recommendations, and we want to do that for our students too, right? And so having that recommendation form with those questions that the student has to answer, right? It's not just you asking the teacher. We have also asked the student to do something in order to prepare to ask you. And so I think too, that helps the teacher say, okay, there's been some ownership on the student's part, that you're not just asking something of me, but you've also done something in order for me to write a more individualized recommendation letter. So I think that has helped a lot. And I think that, you know, just kind of partly that education piece of, you know, we want to be able to showcase our students as well as we can. And that really doesn't go to a resume. It goes to those individual points, which is why we use that instead of a resume, right? Like those questions that we had on our letter of rec letter is a really helpful resource. So I have a tool for the tracking their activities that was linked. And again, if you email me, I can totally send that to you. If these slides aren't sent to y'all, I can link that and send that to you really quickly. How involved am I? So it is really, yep, that's a really good question. How involved am I in the letter of rec process? Do you offer gentle reminders? The general reminders are really just being mindful of the big, like, we kind of start the teacher recommendation process. And again, we also tell teachers, students need to give you time, right? And so if a student has asked you last minute, then you also have the right to say no. But we also tell teachers really from the jump, like October 15th is that first big date, and then it's really November 1st, right? We kind of give them some timelines. And so we may send out a reminder, but we don't really that should be a student-owned process. And so in engaging the teachers with it, I think we mentioned deadlines more, but we don't really have as big of an involvement with that process. Sometimes teachers will come and talk to us about, hey, a student's asked me to write this letter and I just don't know what to say, or I just don't know how to do it. And that can be really a collaborative process between the school counselor and teacher, or it can be a process where you are able to look at the letter of rec that the teacher wrote and, you know, kind of give suggestions or give tips and hints for them. I agree that for some teachers it seems seamless for them to manage their letters, and for others it's like whack-a-mole. So sometimes I think we have to think of the things that we would do with our students that we would do with teachers, right? So how do we manage our letters of recommendation? And so what have we done to help us as a framework, or how have we told our students to kind of organize themselves in the college process? What can we kind of then also be giving to the teachers to help them? Hey, this is a really great resource to organize your tools too. So I think there are tools for students' organization and timeline of their process. And so I think that we can also use that for teachers as well. And just talking to them too about your process. Like, this is kind of how I stay on top of my letters of rec. This is how I stay on top of my deadlines when I have students applying to all of these schools. So sometimes it's also just speaking from personal experience.
Anyone else have any questions?
And sorry, I went over.
No, no worries.
Like I said, please don't hesitate to email. I'm happy to answer questions, send along any other resources that I mentioned, or talk to you more about it. So I've been in your shoes, so I know what it is like.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. All right. We're going to move right along to our final presenter.
Jason, I just gave you permission to be able to take over the remote control, so it's all you.
Awesome, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So sound good? Okay, let's see. I see it. All right, cool. So let us begin. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Well, good morning, good afternoon for any of our colleagues in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jason C. I am with the Tennessee Higher Education Commission and the Student Assistance Corporation. Many of you, assuming many of you or all of you are with Tennessee, many of you know us as the agency which administers all of our state financial aid programs. Shout out, many of you also probably attended at one of our 9 FAFSA boot camps that we did back in the fall. I think we had over almost 800 school counselors, financial aid administrators, college admissions recruiters, and college access professionals registered to attend those events. So shout out to you guys. Today, the idea is I'm going to kind of give us a where are we now with this FAFSA, right? This 24-25 FAFSA. Some of you may have actually already heard this presentation a couple of weeks ago when we did our statewide 1 month in FAFSA report. So without further ado, let's go into the slides. Few updates in case you missed any of these from a deadline perspective. And selfishly, this is from our agency's perspective. April 15th remains our TSAA priority deadline. Folks, that's the Tennessee Student Assistance Award, right? That is our version of the Pell Grant, which is limited funded, unlike our other programs we administer. So that's why, at least as of today, we have kept April 15th as the priority deadline for TSAA consideration, because that pot of money is sometimes runs out, period. Tennessee Promise, that deadline has been extended to May 15th. So just a heads up in case you missed one of the emails from my team out to you about the Tennessee Promise FAFSA deadline. As it relates to the 24-25 FAFSA, that deadline for Tennessee Promise purposes has been extended to May 15th. And then, as always, for our families who are completing the FAFSA for Hope Scholarship purposes, I think many of us encourage early completion of the FAFSA, as we should. But as a reminder, students always have until September 1st to get the FAFSA in for Hope Scholarship, and specifically for fall payment of the Hope Scholarship. So oftentimes, as someone who's now been blessed to have done this for 18 years, if I run into a family over the summer, or as a college counselor, school counselor, you reach out to me and say, hey, I have a student that's never done the FAFSA. It's July. Can they still do it for the Hope Scholarship? The answer is yes, right? If a student or parent ever comes to you and says, we haven't done it, should we do it? Your short go-to answer is yes, do the FAFSA, right? And then go from there. But those are our deadlines, and specifically just updating really the Tennessee Promise deadline of these 3 programs that you need to take note of, and that it is now May 15th. One of the other updates to share is during the FAFSA boot camps, as I reviewed all the 24-25 FAFSA screens, the guidance that we had received from FAFSA back in the fall in a Q&A, specifically from another state who observed universal free and reduced lunch, the question was, hey, FAFSA, quote, our state, I think it was the state of New York, we have universal free and reduced lunch. Does that mean all of our families should check the you receive free and reduced lunch box if posed? FAFSA's answer on several webinars that I watched was, yes, you should. So during our boot camps statewide, I conveyed the same messaging specifically to districts who here in Tennessee recognize universal free and reduced lunch. That being said, on January the 12th, FAFSA came out with an update in saying that only parents who otherwise qualify financially should mark this box. And as you might imagine, when I shared this a few weeks ago, I had several schools that have universal free and reduced lunch say, well, Jason, what about all of our parents and students that have already done the FAFSA and marked it as such and did not qualify for it financially? Guys, listen, I would say for the most part, don't worry about it. FAFSA has a lot of other issues going on than us worrying about making that correction at this point in time. But if you are a school counselor or a leader of a school district or a high school that has universal free and reduced lunch, just understand the guidance now when a parent is asked, does anyone in the household receive free and reduced lunch? They should only check that box if they otherwise qualify for that program financially. And then finally, since the webinar I alluded to several weeks ago, I think one of the biggest updates that occurred, I think it's been now a week ago today, was that the Department of Education said they were going to have to update some data tables specifically to account for inflation to help calculate this new student aid index, otherwise known as the SAI. What does this mean for our families? One, positively, this means that this could be a positive impact where the student's eligibility for Pell Grant could increase, right? So that's a positive. The negative is that because of these updates, that the FAFSA processing would not begin until, quote, the first half of March. So, to everyone as it relates to Jason, when I'm asked, when the team's asked, when will this 24-25 FAFSA process so that we can see our FAFSA submission summary, the new student aid report? The answer is, per FAFSA, the first half of March is now when they're going to get around to processing these applications. Once the applications are processed, that's when the colleges listed on the FAFSA should then receive the records for these students. That is when our agency should receive the records of the students. And this is assuming that this timeline is followed. But that was the biggest update that happened last week. Is, again, just heads up, the processing of this 24-25 FAFSA will now be delayed until the first half of March so that they can update the data tables so that the SAI calculation is done correctly to account for current inflation. So let's go into the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I've presented a few times as it relates to this 24-25 FAFSA. The good is that for some of our families, this is the simplest FAFSA ever, all right? And FAFSA actually came out over the weekend with some guidance that my team and several of us across the state that do FAFSAs day in and day out had observed, which is specifically for, again, some families who completed the FAFSA in this process where, right, step one, student creates their FSCID account. All right, if the parent's new to FAFSA, one parent creates their FSCID account. Specifically, once those accounts have been created, those individuals should wait 3 days so that those accounts can verify with the Social Security Administration. Those that have done that and then continued on to step two in completing the FAFSA typically have experienced greater success than those who have immediately created their FSCID and then immediately logged in to complete the FAFSA. That's where some errors have occurred. So again, as we were encouraging our schools back in the fall, it's really important, students and parents ideally to have created their accounts at least 3 days prior to a FAFSA workshop so that their accounts have been authenticated. And again, those are the students and parents that have had more of a seamless experience. That being said, studentaid.gov, this is where they can go to create their account if needed. Click create account. Again, wait the 3 days. The one thing that we did introduce at the boot camps using this photo, there had been a lot of, honestly, misinformation out there about, oh, do both parents have to create accounts if married? Well, I use this photo throughout our boot camps to explain, if parents are married and they filed taxes jointly in 2022, then in that case, the FAFSA should be what it's always been, which is the student would need an FSC ID to do the student portion, and then one parent, again, if married and they filed taxes jointly in 2022, only one parent would need an account in order to complete the parent section of the 24-25 FAFSA. What's new and different this year is for our parents who are married or remarried and they filed taxes separately in 2022. That is the example where I need both parents to have FSC IDs, because in those scenarios where married or remarried and the two parents filed separately in 22, that's when each will need an FSC ID, because each will need to complete a parent section in order for that student's FAFSA to be complete. Once you've navigated that, right, and once those accounts, again, if new and created, have been authenticated in 3 days, that's when this order should be followed, in my opinion. The student should go in, complete the student section first. Within that student section, they will invite their parents to complete the FAFSA. And once the student submits their section, that's when the parent should then log in at studenta.gov to accept that student's invitation and complete the parent section from there. Again, where this prescribed steps have been, followed, that's where I've seen the best success. And again, over the weekend, FAFSA actually sent an update saying specifically this: when completing the FAFSA, if you follow that the student completes their section first and then the parent completes their section, that's when most families have had the best success as it relates to this 24-25 FAFSA. From a login perspective, this is just kind of going in from the parent perspective. Let's say after the student has submitted their sections, parent goes to studenta.gov, clicks log in, parent then logs in with their username and password. Once they're logged in, they should see that they have a pending invitation from that student that's completed their section. They'll click view my activity, and then on the next screen, they'll accept the invitation. This will take the parent to the parent section of the FAFSA, where they will then have 3 sections to complete. And once those sections have been completed, that student's FAFSA will be finished. Unless, right, the example is the parents are married and they filed separately in 2022. And in that example, I will have to have the second parent to log in and complete a separate parent section of the 24-25 FAFSA. The bad is all these errors that parents and students have encountered. Okay. One thing, I call it the bad. Folks, FAFSA system errors have always been an issue with the FAFSA system, even with previous FAFSA cycles. And these errors are not just with the 24-25 FAFSA. There are 2 camps of errors, right? There are some that are, quote, unexplained. Those are truly bad. But then there are some that are user generated, right? And so generally speaking, like yesterday, I had a great day in Crossville at Cumberland County High School, and I encountered several students and parents who encountered system errors. And one thing that I've taught my team, and I've tried to teach in all of our trainings with counselors and et cetera, is sometimes it's best for us to log into whether it's the student's account and the parent's account at studenta.gov, top right-hand corner where they see their first name, click that down arrow, click settings, and then on the next screen, let's click personal information so that we can review the personal information. Because folks, at times, some of these errors are because The SSA verification status indicates no match, right? Meaning perhaps the student entered their social security number wrong, or the parent entered their social security number incorrectly, or even if it says matched, like it does from my screen, right? Based upon my information. Another thing that in doing this, sometimes you and I learn professionally is, especially for some users, maybe there's been a last name change, right? So for example, maybe you have a student that's trying to invite their mom to complete the parent section of the FAFSA using mom's current last name, but mom has an account that reflects their old last name. This will lead to, quote, an error, right? And so oftentimes, if we have mom to log in to review their personal information, you and I can see, oh, my last name's different. Now, at this point in time, we need to update the last name. And then once that's updated and reprocessed, then the student should be able to invite their parent as a contributor. Folks, I've also seen where on this page, and I know I stopped at the date of birth, but I've seen where date of births have been misentered by the user creating their account. 3 weeks ago, I was in high school. Mom had previously, quote unquote, done the FAFSA, had an account. We logged into her account. Her year of birth was wrong, right? And so that was what was causing the error. So again, the bads, as always, these errors. And what's frustrating is you don't really know other than you see an error message. And so one thing I'm trying to teach, my team and others is sometimes it's best to stop. Let's ask the user to log into their account. And again, if they click on their first name, go to settings, click on personal information. That's where we can review this information and ensure that it's what is being communicated on, whether it's any of the contributor screens or, as I was listening to the last presentation this morning, I was answering an email from a school counselor that had an error with a parent trying to invite or trying to identify their spouse, that they were getting an error message, and come to find out the issue was on the spouse's information on their studentaid.gov account, the spouse's date of birth was wrong. And all this data has to match everywhere throughout the FAFSA system. The other thing, we talked about this earlier in the updates, that FAFSA submission summary. So been notified by a lot of parents, students, counselors, all the above, right? Where, you may be applying for a scholarship from some local entity and you're being asked for your FAFSA submission summary, or they're still using, I need your student aid report, which, folks, again, FAFSA submission summary is the, quote, new student aid report. These FAFSA submission summaries will not be available until FAFSA processes. And again, the update last week was that should occur the first half of March. Now, forgive me for being somewhat cynical. I'm reading and hearing that as most likely mid-March, at least as of today, right? So, for some of our local providers, I don't know if my friend Kelly P may be listening, but Kelly, who helps administer scholarships for the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, back in January, this student reached out and was concerned about the delay of the FAFSA submission summary and not knowing their student aid index and the Community Foundation scholarship deadline. So I reached out to Kelly and said, hey, Kelly, listen, I can't dictate your deadline, but just heads up. There are some issues related to this FAFSA system. Some of our students are not getting SAIs calculated. None of our students are going to have their student aid report / FAFSA submission summaries until FAFSA processes. And Kelly, emailed back and said, Jason, thank you. I was unaware of this. We will make changes to our process and reach out to these students to let them know that, to go ahead and do our process, but we will accept summaries and SAIs later once they are officially known. So guys, assuming I have folks all across the state of Tennessee listening to this, that's my biggest thing, especially to local scholarship entities. If there's one that's had a has a February 15th deadline specifically, it may be good to just make them aware of these FAFSA issues. We can't dictate what their deadline is, but please understand, I'm not speaking about the colleges. I'm talking about like our local scholarship providers. Some of them are not, quote, plugged into all this FAFSA stuff like you and I are, and they just need to be aware of this, because many, once they become aware, will accommodate our students from that perspective. Some counselors have asked also about, Jason, because there's not been any processing, because we don't have any FAFSA reports that we can pull from your system to identify who our students are that submitted the FAFSA or not, how can we track this? And my answer is, this will take you to do this manually, but just heads up. If you want to be able to track, or see if a student has submitted their FAFSA or not, ask them to log into their studentaid.gov account. All right. Once they log in, top right-hand corner, they see their first name, click that down arrow, click My Activity. On the My Activity screen, there will be a 2425 FAFSA form. When they click that hyperlink, that will take them to what's called their FAFSA tracker. And this is where you're able to see. If you see, a check mark by FAFSA form started, and you see that number 2 highlighted, note it isn't highlighted kind of in blue, and it says FAFSA form submitted. And in this case, it says January 30th, 2024. Also, in the top right-hand corner of the screen, you see when this student, which I'll say this, folks, I just use my screen for this. I started and submitted the FAFSA on January the 30th. This is your proof that Jason C. has completed his FAFSA in this case. And again, until these FAFSAs process and until we begin receiving these records from FAFSA, some point in March or even later than that, that's when we're going to finally start having FAFSA reports available on our end. But again, I can't put a timetable on that because of this. So some districts and some counselors are beginning to manually track this. And this is the way I would encourage you to do it. For you to have proof, just have the student log in so that they see that you can see their FAFSA tracker. And if you see something like this, then that means they have submitted their FAFSA. And basically at this point in time, we're just waiting for it to process. Before we segue into the ugly, I do want to hit on one other thing right quick here, and it's this. And Trish, Tyler, forgive me. This is an additional slide I should have put into this presentation. But some counselors have emailed us concerned that specifically students who have submitted the FAFSA, they've received an email saying the subject line typically is your FAFSA has been received. Okay. When they open that email, they read that their SAI cannot be calculated. And some counselors have reached out, students and parents as well, concerned. And specifically some have been saying, Jason, this kid should be eligible for financial aid, and this is saying they're not. Let me be very clear. All right. An email that says SAI cannot be calculated does not mean that the student will be ineligible for financial aid. Right. It does not necessarily mean that. Per FAFSA, in my experience now helping students and parents statewide, is basically half the students and families completing this FAFSA, they're getting an SAI calculated and reflected on the confirmation screen. Within that, your FAFSA received email, and then the other half is not. And per FAFSA, there's no rhyme or reason why, for example, Jason C's FAFSA has the SAI calculated, whereas John Doe's FAFSA says SAI cannot be calculated. As I've been sharing with counselors and parents of students who are concerned about this, folks, we're all at the mercy of FAFSA at this point in time. If you log into their tracker and you see that FAFSA has been submitted, but the SAI, right, has not been calculated, we are all at the mercy of FAFSA to process these applications. At that point in time, per FAFSA, If all the information is there for them, then the SAI will properly calculate at that point in time. But again, not until these FAFSAs process. On the other hand, if that student, for example, to the question, do you want to apply for an unsubsidized loan only? If they indicated yes, that might be why the SAI cannot be calculated as being triggered. And in that case, that's one of those examples. Once that FAFSA is processed, once that student logs in to review their FAFSA submission summary, if they see that there's someone that applied for an unsub loan only by answering that question on the screen that yes, they only want to apply for an unsub loan only, that's an example of a student that will need to make a correction again once these FAFSAs process. And then finally, the ugly, it's with our mixed status families. And folks, bottom line, currently, our mixed status families are unable to submit the FAFSA online due to a myriad of system issues. FAFSA, in a meeting I was honored to be a part of at the end of last week, I heard FSA leadership say that they are devoting, all of their resources right now to fix the system for our mixed status families, but there was no specific timetable given. We're just all, again, waiting for FAFSA to let us know, hey, our mixed status families should now be able to submit the FAFSA online. So we're just all waiting for that communication from federal student aid. Guys, as a reminder, and, more and more, this is something that is not just concentrated in a few communities statewide. We're encountering now mixed status families in the majority of Tennessee counties. And, if you are a school counselor that potentially is helping a mixed status family for the first time, let me pause. Mixed status family typically is where the student is a U.S. citizen, but the parent does not have a social or has an ITIN, an individual tax identification number, or is a parent that's on a work permit. That's what I'm referring to as a mixed status family. That being said, these parents for the first time are being asked to create an FSA ID, just like any parent would. And as we're learning, these parents will be greeted with one of two pathways upon creating their FSA ID account, okay? The first pathway, and I've only seen this now a handful of times, is a parent who creates their FSA ID. They go through the 7 steps, including the TransUnion verifying questions. And when they answer those, on the next screen where it says your account's been created, it also says your identity has been verified. In these cases, this parent, in theory, is good to go and is able to, quote, log in and complete the parent section of the FAFSA, right? However, as I said on the previous screen, even for this parent, the FAFSA is still broken, right? Even one that has been verified despite not having a social. The FAFSA system is still broken. These parents are still unable to complete the parent section. The second pathway, which I think the majority of us are experiencing more often than not, is parent without a social, or a parent that has an ITIN, or parent, again, that has a work permit social, creates their account. At the end, it says your account's been created, but you need to contact us. These parents are now going to have to go through that identity confirmation process where they must call FAFSA for a case number to begin the process. In recent weeks, FAFSA has said that some parents should be able to also email or live chat with a rep in order to be assigned a case number. But once that case number is assigned, then at that point in time, they're able to complete an attestation form, as well as upload acceptable, that's hard for me to say, documentation in order to have their account identified. I've had several parents that are now successfully navigated this process, but yet again, at this point in time, they're still unable to complete the parent section of the FAFSA because of the system issues related to mixed status families. Here is a just quick synopsis of the acceptable documentation. Many of you should be a part of our listserv already. We've sent a PDF out on this process, so for many, this should not be new, but this is just a slide about the acceptable documentation. And then finally, as a reminder, we've got the 7 pre-recorded FAFSA videos that you can find on our website, collegefortn.org. You can get to it directly by going to collegefortn.org/FAFSA. Or if you go to collegefortn.org, hover over Money for College and then click how to fill out the FAFSA form. This is where you can access our 7 24-25 FAFSA videos, beginning with the FSA creation, and also see a number of resources on that page as well. I think perhaps in the agenda that Tyler and Trish sent out, there's also the shout out. We are doing a line-by-line webinar every Monday night, currently through the month of March. Folks, we will be extending that through the month of April, but we're actually testing out, perhaps considering moving it to another night, as opposed to just Monday nights. But just FYI, we're doing a line-by-line walkthrough of the 24-25 FAFSA every Monday night, 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern time, and families can register for that. And again, your outreach specialists, which could be me in some instances, we're emailing you that basically every week to remind your parents of that resource if they want to join and watch one of us complete the FAFSA in real time. Trish, I'm done. Do we have questions, Tyler?
Yes, we have one. Are you able to see that, Jason?
Yeah, let me go do it.
Oh, there's 2 now.
Hey, it's my friend Emily. Oh, it's also my friend Linda. Awesome. Let's see. Let's go Linda first. See what's gotten through. Yeah, Linda, I have. So the question, folks, just in case you're not seeing it, has anyone successfully gone through the identity verification process? Linda, I have now officially worked with a handful of students that have been able, specifically from the parent perspective, to go through the identity confirmation process. Specifically, I was at a charter school on Monday night that had been at previously in the month of January, and there were a handful of families that reported back to me that night that they had received their case numbers, they had completed the attestation form, uploaded the acceptable documentation, and within the last week, they had received an email from FAFSA that their account had been confirmed, that they were, quote, now able to log in and complete the parent section of the FAFSA. But again, as I've said numerous times, the system is still not allowing such parents to actually complete the parent section of the FAFSA. Emily's question, should parents without socials be having issues or errors with creating their FSA IDs, or are the issues supposed to only be submitting the actual form, trying to figure out? Yeah. So Emily, I've seen everything here. Tyler, that's me pausing. I'm thinking, I'm going through all my what I've seen so far. So I've seen, let me share what I've encountered. My first FAFSA workshop was, I think, January 4th. It was with a local group in Nashville. Working with several Latinx families. And one thing I discovered working with these families, in this case, these were current college students, right? So they had done the FAFSA before. However, the parents did not have socials. Well, one common thread among 4 of the families I worked with is, for whatever reason, in years past, when they were being helped with the FAFSA, someone, and I think some of you know, this would not be me, those of you who worked with me, someone said, hey, parent, use that I-10 to create an account, or use that work permit social to create your FSA ID. Well, unfortunately, because they did that, they're kind of stuck. And FAFSA's workaround right now is for these parents that had previously created an account that did not have a social security number, that now they need to create a new account indicating that they don't have a social because they don't. But they would have to use a new email address because their primary email most likely is associated with the other account. And that's the only workaround. So Emily, yes, I've ran into those errors like that. I've also ran into errors where some parents have gone on step one, say, I don't have a social. Then they get an error page. Well, what do you do for those? Well, I'll log out. And if you're able to go into incognito mode or private browsing mode on the browser, try it again. Some parents have then been able to navigate through the 7 steps that way. And, then there are some of these errors that just, that again, are just unexplained. And those things, those are the ones I've reported up to FAFSA and said, hey, here's an error I'm encountering at this high school. Let you know about it. And Emily, essentially, I'm just waiting to hear back from them. Anyways, Emily, I'm kind of team. If you have parents that need to create an account, I would say you need to do that and begin this process, because I'm optimistic that these system issues will eventually be fixed. And then the families will be able to complete the online FAFSA, sometime between now and into the month of March. But guys, that's me. Y'all know me. I'm an optimistic person to begin with. And, that's just how I choose to live my life. And so in that case, that's my optimism. So if I'm a school counselor, if I'm someone that's like this afternoon, I have a FAFSA workshop, any parent that doesn't have a social, that hasn't created their FSA ID, that's the first thing I'm going to have them to do. If they have to go through the confirmation process, then I'm going to start them there. And then I'm going to tell the student at that point in time, hey, when FAFSA fixes their issues, hopefully you'll be able to submit online and go from there. The other comment, I think, Tyler, Trish, others that you may be like, Jason, why haven't you mentioned the paper FAFSA? Let's talk about paper FAFSA right quick. Is it an option for our mixed status families? Absolutely. But here's what you need to know. Per FAFSA, paper FAFSAs will not be processed until after online applications are processed. Because they've come out and said that gives me optimism and hope that these online fixes for our mixed status families will actually occur at some point between now and whenever, right? That would make the paper FAFSA a moot point. So I will share with everyone at certain workshops, if a student, if I can see the concern in their eyes, right? I'm helping them do a paper FAFSA. If they want to print and mail it out, I'm letting them, but I will say this, or I'm saying do it. But let me be very clear. Whenever we hear from FAFSA that the system issues with mixed status families are fixed, we need to direct all these families back online to complete the online application, because most likely, if that fixes between now and April, that online application is going to, quote, beat the paper FAFSA application, which I read in between the lines. I'm going to assume paper applications are not going to be processed until April. So that's my comments there. Tyler, anything else? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's all the questions. Anybody else have a question?
And Tyler, I'll say Emily, Linda, and probably the majority of the people who are listening to me right now, I think they all know they can call, text my work cell at any time with any issues, and I'll do my best to try to help resolve anything, or reach out to your outreach specialists, and they'll do the best that they can to help a family through any issues that we're encountering. So, Tyler, Trish, Sakak, thank you so much for allowing me to speak this afternoon.
Thank you. We really appreciate the information.
Yeah.
And Trish, were you able to get control back?
Tyler's not giving it to me.
Okay. See if it'll let me.
Maybe they want to make me host again.
No.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for everyone for joining us this morning and participating in our webinar for the Counselor Drive-In. If there are any other following questions, always feel free to reach out to Tyler and I. Again, we will be following up with more information about those continuing education credits. We also, did Kristen already talk about, is Kristen still on? Not Kristen. Oh my God, Catherine. Catherine. Is Catherine still on? If not, that's okay.
I don't believe so.
Not sure. We do have a member of the SAI team here, though.
Oh, perfect. Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Yeah, we just wanted to say some upcoming events on behalf of the Southern ACAC. We have the Sweet Tea Tour coming up. We have the annual conference that's coming up as well in March. And then we have our Tennessee Day on the Hill coming up later on next week, which is really exciting. Is there any other things that we wanted to talk about?
The last day for SACAC early bird registration is this Friday, the 9th. And
the Sweet Tea Tour registration is live on the website as well as the annual conference too. Yeah.
I think Sweet Tea registration doesn't go live till the 20th.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
And then, so they're going to be in South Carolina this year, as you can see, but there's 12 colleges on that tour. So a great number of schools to include there. And Jason also mentioned earlier about the line by line webinar. And the agenda was just for us. So don't worry, you didn't miss anything because we didn't email the agenda out to everyone. But those are every Monday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So go to college4tn.org and click on events, and you'll see them every Monday to register for those there. So those webinars are conducted by THEC and the TSEC outreach team. And I think that's all the announcements we have, but I think the state and area initiatives team wanted to say a few things.
Yeah, before I let everyone go, my name is Darren Morgan. I'm a member of the SAI team along with Corey and Kristen. And I really just want to thank everyone for coming on, and special thanks to Trish and Tyler for putting together an amazing event. I learned a ton of information sitting on here. They've been working tirelessly for about a month or two, maybe even more, putting this on. So thank you all for all of your hard work on this, and we really appreciate you guys for being a part of SACAC. As far as everyone else, thank you all for coming on, and we hope to see you at our conference, which is coming up in Raleigh, North Carolina. See you guys soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the week.